Okay, good afternoon. So I want to start this live stream by discussing, obviously, the passing of Bill Kenwright. During yesterday's live stream, he sadly passed away. Now, obviously, the backdrop to what's going on at Everton, it will be interesting to see what happens with his stake in the club. He does have a minority stake. Well, his estate has a minority stake within the football club. Um, but Bill Kenwright's passing was not expected. He had recently had surgery, but it was very unexpected, and it does throw a little bit of chaos into the ongoing ownership saga at Everton Football Club. So I thought I'd make a brief comment on that. It is sad that he has passed. He has been a controversial chairman. There's been a lot of frustration thrown his way, and there's been a lot of decisions taken by the Everton board that's not gone down well with the fan base. And of course, this is a club that seems to be struggling in its direction, and where is it going, and what's happening with this potential takeover. So I believe his family will inherit the stake. Whether they decide to keep um, a partial ownership stake in Everton or whether they decide to sell up will be interesting. But it does add extra um, to an extra element to the mix, the situation. Rugby union news. So obviously, earlier this week, Courtney Laws announced his international retirement. He's most likely going to be the captain on Friday's game against Argentina, the third, fourth place playoff. That would be his 106th cap, should he play. He's one of only 5 English players to get over the 100 cap mark. The first was obviously Jason Leonard in 2003. 20 years ago in that World Cup. But Courtney Laws is only one of 5 England players to get over 100 caps. He's decided to retire from international rugby. He will still play for Northampton Saints for the foreseeable future, for the next couple of seasons at least, I would have thought. He may retire at the end of the season. He may decide to carry on playing for another couple of years, but he's in his mid-30s now, and he's obviously decided to call it a day for Test rugby. Same with Lee Halfpenny. Lee Halfpenny has also announced he's retiring from international rugby with immediate effect. I was actually surprised that he's still playing. In build up to the World Cup, I was surprised he was still playing at Test level. He's had a lot of concussions and a lot of injuries throughout his career. He could have played a lot more Test matches. That's what's scary. Lee Harpin, I wouldn't say he's the best fullback, but my God, he's got a cannon of a boot on him. He can kick a goal, a conversion or a penalty from 55, 60 metres if he wants to. He's a great goal kicker. He's very good under the high ball and kicking from hand. I don't think we've seen enough of Lee Halfpenny ball in hand, running the ball in attack. Now that's a more of a tactical thing. He's played most of his career with Warren Gatland, and that's obviously clearly more of a tactical thing. But Lee Halfpenny has also decided to announce his retirement from international rugby. He will also continue playing for the foreseeable future at club level, but internationally, he's also decided to call it a day. My pick for the 18th team. There's been a lot of uh, traction for a second team in New Zealand. There's been talk about Perth, as there always will be, because the NRL's been there before and they want to be seen as a national competition. Papua New Guinea, they've got some test matches in this Pacific Nations series that's taking place at the moment in Port Moresby. Obviously, in Papua New Guinea or PNG, however you want to look at it, it's the national sport, so crowds won't be a problem. So attendance shouldn't be a problem. But it's all about the finances and the infrastructure, and PNG does not have great infrastructure. It's not a very economically developed country. It's a very poor country. And while it's got great trading links with New Zealand, the Pacific Island nations like Fiji and Samoa and Tonga, and of course Australia as its main trading partners, um, the national infrastructure isn't great. There's not a lot of money um, in the economy. Um, but the people are mad for the sport. There's been a lot of talk about potentially like a Pacific Island team based out of Fiji. another team in Queensland. I until the official bids are tabled, much like what we had with the last round of expansion, where the Dolphins ultimately ended up being the 17th team. Until the official bids are formally tabled to the NRL, and they are considered by the ARL Commission. We're going off speculation and rumor, which I think is quite disingenuous. So until anything concrete gets put down on the table saying that here's an official bid, I think the Central Coast and the North Sydney Bears, or the Central Coast Bears, I think that's where they've got a stadium that's ready. They're willing to officially put a bid down as soon as official bidding can begin. So we may see the Central Coast get a team with the Bears organisation, and that's been heavily talked about in the media this last 12 months, especially during this season. Perth, I think, is an undervalued sports market. There's a very well organised state league in Western Australia. There's quite a few Western Australians playing in both the men's and women's NRL and NRLW competitions. So there are first graders in both men and women's competitions that have played or were born in Western Australia. There's a bigger player base than the state of Victoria, which does have a team in the Melbourne Storm. The state of origin does very well when games are taken there. Yeah, look, the Australian government countering chart. I mean, I try and keep the politics off this channel and for the other channel. Sport and politics. I mean, that becomes a bit, murky and it's very divisive as a subject matter. I think that creates more division and argument than solution. But I think Perth would. The one downside for Perth is the travel. That's the one downside. Obviously, the time zone difference, the fact it is the most isolated major city in the world. It's a fact. But the closest major city to Perth is Adelaide. Let that sink in. So it is right in the arse end of nowhere, and you've got to try and encourage players who are based in Queensland and New South Wales and potentially in New Zealand to relocate themselves and their families to the other side of the country. We see this problem in other major sports leagues when it comes to free agents and expansion. Players who don't get cast off in expansion drafts or as free agents and signed by an expansion team. It's not a good feeling when you're basically told you're basically going to go to the crap team. Basically, what it is. And of course, I don't know how each state and territory in Australia deals with its property taxes and its sales taxes and its income tax rates, whether that's done federally or at state and territory level. But you look at the US and Canada when it comes to where free agents sign, and the teams they generally sign for, and why certain locations do find it difficult to sign that big name free agent or get that trade done or that contract extension done. The Canadian locations, apart from Toronto, to a certain extent Montreal, tend to struggle sometimes to attract players because of the higher tax rate, the exchange rate when it comes to currency, property prices also, depending on what location, the weather, and some cities like Vancouver, for example, are notoriously expensive on tax and cost of living. The cost of living does have an impact, and relocating your family. The Perth population has doubled. Look, Perth is a rapidly growing metropolitan area. The average age of the inhabitants of the city of Perth and the surrounding metro area is a younger average age demographic. It is actually cheaper to live in Perth than on the eastern seaboard of Australia, so that may entice players to want to sign for a Perth team and negotiate, contract extension should a team be placed there. It is slightly cheaper on house prices and I don't know how the tax system in Western Australia works compared to Sydney and Brisbane when it comes to property taxes and other related expenditure like that, and mortgage payments and loans. But it is a rapidly growing city. It is cheaper than the East Coast to live in Western Australia. There's more land. Um, it's Western Australia is bigger than Europe. It's massive. It's like one of the second biggest national subdivision in the world after Siberia. Western Australia is massive. Once you get out of the Perth metro area and the southwestern portion of the state, you may not see someone for 5 6 days. It's literally wilderness. You've got a couple of mid-sized, medium-sized towns, small cities like Broome, for example, and Port Hedland, but Western Australia is massive, and not a lot of people live in it. But no, yeah, the population demographic has changed massively in the last 25 years. Um, it is a rapidly growing city. Um, there's a lot of money diving in, and I think um, the City Council of Perth and the state government want to diversify. They want to get sports teams there as well because the sports industry brings in a lot of income. That's why they regularly want to, host State of Origin as the neutral location. Um, and Perth has the facilities, it has the stadiums already in place. It's not as if they have to build a new stadium. It's not as if, and then there is a very good organised state league in Western Australia that's got decent participation figures. The issue that the NRL has is the AFL has embedded itself in Perth. There are two AFL teams in Perth, so they're already behind the curve a little bit because the AFL has established itself in the city, um, and uh, you, while one team is successful in Fremantle, and Fremantle was part of the Perth metro area, um, the AFL has got two well-established teams now in the city of Perth, or in the wider metro area, and the AFL is also now, in New South Wales and Queensland. Um, Various levels of success, but they've also they do cover every corner in regards to every state apart from Tasmania has an AFL team. Um, a lot of the players come from Tasmania and the Northern Territory that also play in the AFL. So the NRL is behind domestically in Australia. The thing is, the NRL is a better global brand, and they're taking games to Vegas. The money from the Vegas games, they've already started ramping up the um, promotion in Vegas. They've got a lot of billboards up. They've got a lot of advertising. They're trying to advertise to the domestic US audience. They've advertised heavily and already starting to sell tickets to the Australian market, but they are also doing that for the American market. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many fans in Vegas are from Australia who go over to watch the games, and how many are from the city of Las Vegas or from the US in general going to Vegas to watch the games. There is a fan base in the US. We know this. There is a TV deal in the US for the NRL and the Super League as well, for that matter. So there is a TV deal in place where they show NRL and Super League games. Rugby league has been played in the US. So there is that. Jared Hayne can't go to Vegas. That makes it good. The thing is, the concern that I have is the players and the media, for that matter, and the fans behaving in Vegas. That's the massive concern that I have, is that the players will misbehave, and that certain elements in the media might like to overdo it as well. And so the concern I have is when we have players misbehaving. There's a lot of distractions in Vegas. This is why it's called Sin City for a reason. Willie Mason with his bright white teeth. I don't think Willie Mason's the worst of the bunch. I think there are far worse candidates for misbehaviour in both the playing group, the coaching setup, club directors, the media, and the fans. We've seen at Magic Round the last couple of years some ugly incidents at Suncorp Stadium, and a lot of it's to do with drink being involved, which is very noticeable. And of course, in the age of social media, very very quickly, that's on Twitter, that's on Facebook, YouTube, and other social media, Snapchat, TikTok. Very very quickly in the age of social media, I'm just using them as examples because they're some of the big social media platforms, but there are others. And very very quickly, um, videos and photographs and things will surface of incidents in the crowd, and some of them were quite bad incidents that not only blew up on social media, were well covered in the mainstream media as well, of disorder up in the stands, and then ends up going global. But why are you glad the Melbourne Storm aren't going? I mean, surely one of the most successful teams in the NRL era, the modern era. It's interesting that they're not going. Um, but that was the decision taken by the NRL. These are the four clubs that have agreed or been selected to go this year. South Sydney were only willing to get on board if there was a long-term plan to regularly continue to play games in Vegas or in the US. I am surprised. To be honest, I am a little bit surprised the Melbourne Storm weren't considered as one of the teams. Now we don't. I don't. I haven't read anything that says all the clubs were involved in discussions. But the clubs that are going make a bit of sense. You've got the oldest rivalry in the game, or in the game in Australia between the Roosters and the Rabbitohs. And you've got the Broncos, and you've got the Manly Sea Eagles. Now, yes, it would have been nice to see, Penrith and Brisbane go head to head in an opener, considering they played the grand final. That was one of the best grand finals we've ever seen. For tension, and if you're a neutral, which that comeback and that lead and the hat trick, and yeah, I mean, is that public knowledge that they weren't considered, or were they decided not to put forward a proposal to go? We know that the Sea Eagles have American money tied up in their ownership. We know, obviously, um, you know, Rusty is obviously involved with South Sydney. Russell Crowe, Hollywood actor. So there's that link. I mean, we know Hugh Jackman's a massive Manly fan as well, and the Roosters and the Broncos are two of the wealthier clubs. So, um, which seem to have that reach with connections. Whether Parramatta were approached or not, it would be interesting to see how the league has worked out what clubs go. Um, that's what's interesting to me. What discussions were actually had. Now we know that for a while now the league has been interested in taking games to the US. This didn't just happen in the last 12 months to 18 months. This has been an ongoing process, I believe, before the pandemic. I honestly believe the league has been strongly looking at this as an option for some time. I don't think this happened because of COVID. I think this has been in the pipeline for some time. Now, whether the initial putting feelers out was a Todd Greenberg thing, because he was very, very good at actually increasing the revenues for the game. Whatever we think of Todd Greenberg and his running of the NRL. Well, Parramatta. I mean, Parramatta is an interesting club with the ups and downs of their off-field finances, their salary cap breach. There's various things that have happened off the field. Very interesting club. It is surprising that the Eels again, we don't know what discussions have been had over a long period of time. Obviously, I wouldn't. I don't think this is just a scheme that Volandis and Abdo have just thought out um, during COVID to try and recoup some lost revenues. I do think this has been a long time planning and negotiating. I think to do something like this and have ideas on the table, this takes some doing to work out if it is viable to do it. Um, that's my personal opinion. I think it took how long it took Major League Baseball, for example, to finally play games in London after delaying and delaying and delaying, pushing back, and eventually in 2019 they go, and then COVID comes along, and then the discussions are on the table for another 3 years, and then they return again, and then they make this long-term commitment. Look at the NFL. I think the NFL wanted to take games to London before Wembley was demolished. They were already, fully aware that when that new stadium was built and opened, that the FA would obviously need money. And look at the design of Wembley Stadium. It's perfect for American football. Um, it is. It's perfect for it. I think the NFL were in discussions with the FA long before Wembley was rebuilt and completed. And I think, and look how that's. Well, Peter Volandis is obviously, he's got ties with politicians. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing, that's another thing. But Albanese obviously was leader of the opposition when the negotiations about taking games to Vegas were in the pipeline and happening. Um, it was a Liberal government that was in charge when the NRL announced that this is what they wanted to do. Obviously, Albanese now obviously won his election. He's now Prime Minister of Australia. But no, Peter Volandis is an interesting character. Love him or loathe him. I have mixed views on Volandis. The one thing I can tell you about Peter Volandis, he gets things done. He gets things done. And when it comes to sports administration and sports governance, um, he gets things done. And we can debate whether all his ideas and all his plans are good for, for rugby league and for horse racing in Australia. But during the pandemic, when they had to go into bubbles and move the league up to Queensland, he negotiated really well, and we haven't had a single game completely abandoned or lost. So from the resumption to this point, every game that has been slated to be played has been played. And a lot of that is down to the arrangements that Volandis and Abdo, for example, got put in place. I think credit where credit's due. He people have mixed views on Peter Volandis and Adra Abdo, but he got deals done, negotiated with local, state, federal government, and ultimately, the league is survived. Not a single club has failed. The league has expanded. They've managed to get a new CBA negotiated that didn't look like it was going to get over the line, and he's a big part of that. Now, I don't agree with all the rule changes and certain aspects of the NRL's governments and rugby league's governance, but I think it seems more assertive under Volandis and Abdo than what's happening with the AFL with Gil McLachlan. I mean, the AFL, he's meant to be not there anymore. Yet Gil McLachlan is still in charge as CEO of the AFL, considering that apparently he's resigned, he's now interim. So they still haven't found Gil McLachlan's replacement, and then you're finding about all the scandals that are coming out in the AFL, which I find very interesting. But no, people do criticise Volandis, and not everyone's happy with how the direction the game's taking. But without decisive leadership 3.5 years ago, I don't think we're in this position now. I don't think the league expands. I don't think they're going to Vegas. I don't think all the teams survive. The TV deal might be worth a lot less. Um, so credit where credit's due. He's got deals done, um, and kept the game afloat. And there were obviously deals done, and discussions had, and arrangements made. And yes, the CBA, I think, the CBA negotiations did drag on far too long. I think we can all agree on that. And Peter Volandes not being in the country at the time that they were dragging on, there are some rumours saying that he was in the US negotiating a lot of the NRL deal to go to Vegas. But I do think if it wasn't for Volandes, we're having a completely different discussion about the state of the game. You know, what teams have gone busts, a whole variety of issues. The situation is completely different. Now, the fact that he's going to a White House dinner as Albanese's guest just shows the networking he's done. He's obviously had to negotiate in order for the league to continue playing during the height of the pandemic with no fans in attendance, then moving up to Queensland, and then and all that, the bubble, and getting the New Zealand team over, the Warriors, relocating them for the best part of 3 years. He's obviously made the contacts in the right places. I do think the governance of the NRL is in a far better place now with Abdo and Volandes than Todd Greenberg was limping on towards the end. Um, it was very noticeable towards the end that Greenberg had no real authority. Um, it, he got a stay of execution by like 2 months, and then he was out the door. Now, I wouldn't say Todd Greenberg completely failed. I just think there was so much scandal and negative press at the time that a lot of people within the organisation of the NRL and within the league itself, Clubland, had lost a lot of faith in his ability to lead. I don't think Greenberg is completely without his merits, but I am highly critical of some of the decisions that Todd Greenberg put in place, and some of the decisions taken, and some of the policies put in place, should I say. And when he was gone, it wasn't a surprise that he was gone. He was on his last legs by that point within the organisation. Um, but there was a lot of media spotlight and social media spotlight on player misbehaviour and how the league dealt with players in different ways. And some of the league, the no fault, no stand down policy, and whether that needs amending and looking at and adjusting has created a lot of division. The whole Jack DeBellin thing, with what happened with Ben Barber, and not a criminal charge laid against him yet. He's basically his contract completely terminated by North Queensland. The Greg English drink drive thing, where he was given the captaincy and stripped the captaincy. A whole host of other scandals that came out in the 2018 off season. We've put a lot of pressure on the league going into 2019 with all the player scandal. There has still been a lot of player scandal during the last couple of seasons, and look, we've got this international window open right now with all these test matches being played. So Tonga playing England in a 3-test series. We've got this Pacific Nations test series that involves Australia and New Zealand, and Samoa and Fiji and PNG and Cook Islands. So there's a lot of rugby league still being played. So we're not really truly in the off season yet, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens when these internationals are done over the next couple of weeks. And we're going to be discussing again player behaviour. I have no doubt there will be more scandal in the off season, more players will misbehave, and we'll see how the league responds to whatever happens in the off season. There's going to be something. Rugby league always has scandals. There's always something going on that shouldn't be going on. Always someone misbehaving. Now, that's where I think rugby league lets itself down is constant off-field dramas involving players, coaches, administrators, and off-field scandals. I think that's where the NRL and Super League and rugby league in general lets itself down. Now, obviously, yesterday we were talking about the the doping and betting scandals in European football, and how they're having an impact. Again, off-field issues impacting the image of the sport when it comes to how you're trying to promote yourself, sell yourself, and it's not a good look. Now, I wouldn't be surprised. Bronson Sherry, for example, is going to be returning to the NRL next season with Canterbury, and that is a very controversial signing. There's been a lot of people saying, well, that he's done his 4 years, he's served his ban. There's nothing to say he can't be registered as a player. The NRL can refuse to register him. I read that London Broncos next season, the Super League will be part-time. They were part-time. They went to part-time status not long after they were relegated from Super League. I think it was the year after. There is no way they're going to be able to compete as a part-time club in Super League. That will be the end for the Broncos. There is no way that is going to be a sustainable model for the club to compete in Super League next year. But in regards to rugby league in the UK and the rest of Europe, there's going to have to be discussions about the future of the structure of the game with the Championship and League One situation, where League One's only got 8 clubs. There's going to have to be discussions in regards to restructuring the club game below the Super League, because that is a complete and utter shambles. If I'm being brute, it's complete and utter shambles. 8 clubs in League One is not financially viable. So we'll see what happens with any potential restructuring of the League One and Championship in regards to rugby league in Europe. But 8 clubs in League One is just not doable. It's a sorry state of affairs when we've got to that point. Big money, players misbehaving. You do sort of, look at the North American major leagues. There's a website dedicated to telling you how many NFL players have got outstanding warrants, federal, state, and local charges against them, and misdemeanor charges. It just tells you how many active NFL players have got charges outstanding against them, or warrants against them, or are currently serving sentences, suspended or custodial or fines or whatever it is. There is a website dedicated solely to looking at NFL player misbehaviour. And then we have I'm surprised that apart from the NFL, which is almost a daily thing with an NFL player getting arrested for some kind of misdemeanor or charged with a felony, the US legal system, depending on the state, is all over the place with what is a felony and what's a misdemeanor, how their legal system works with levels of charges. But it's got so commonplace now with NFL players getting in trouble with legal difficulty that, there was a couple of NFL fans decided to set up a website tracking, all the various legal issues that NFL players face. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. There's been some very high-profile incidents involving NFL players. Very high profile. And now it's become an everyday occurrence that it no longer shocks people anymore. Yet the NFL is the biggest league in North America for revenue. It's the It's the most profitable league, um, as I say, in the US. Um, and yet the players continually damage the image of the league and misbehave and negative headlines. But it's become so commonplace now that it's just shrug shoulders and, what we're going to do. And they continue to do it. But when it's like sports like snooker, which is starting to get their first batch of negative headlines for a long time, and it's to do with match fixing and fixing outcomes of an individual frame or an overall match. And I don't think snooker's prepared for the damage that's been done to it, and the ongoing betting and match fixing scandal that's engulfing the sport. There's been multiple players investigated over the last 5 6 years, and I don't think um, the the sport is equipped to deal with it at all. But look at cycling's reputational damage and all the doping was going on. Still is, but not on the same level. It's never recovered its reputation. Its reputation has been so damaged by the regular doping within the Lance Armstrong, really was the nail in the coffin. I think the pro cycling and the Grand Tours and all that. It's still trying to recover its credibility. So anytime anyone wins a yellow jersey or a welter or a Giro or an Olympic medal, they're going to be like, is he clean? Is that particular cyclist cheating? Is that team cheating? Um, and then cricket with some of the match fixing and spot fixing scandals in cricket and allegations in cricket. There'll be people going, well, this batting collapse looks a bit suspicious. Those bowling figures don't quite look right. There's two. Look at how many extras this bowler's been bowling. This one particular bowler. The very slow run rate or very slow over rate suddenly it's sped up for 5 6 overs and it drops again. Cricket is under the spotlight for alleged and known corruption within cricket. But certain sports like our football here in Europe and American football, negative headlines are a recurring thing. Players misbehave. Insert player name here for insert scandal here. And the NRL, and to a certain extent, and the AFL in growing regularity alongside the NRL, it's reaching a point now where it's become an everyday occurrence, and fans and in the media are like, oh, this is no longer a shock here. This is no longer sensational. This is an everyday thing now, and we're accepting it. We shouldn't accept it. And the concern I have with the NRL going to Vegas is players are going to misbehave. I mean, I remember, was it 2018? Was it 5 Jacksonville Jaguar players were arrested in London over a £60,000 bar tab they refused to pay? They got in trouble. They went on the drink. I think the night before the game, refused to pay or claimed that it wasn't their tab. Tried to do a run without paying. 5 of them, and they were arrested for basically theft and a public nuisance and public intoxication. And this is coming at the time when Saeed Khan was trying to buy Wembley. And do I think cricket's recovered from the Hansi Cronje scandal? At the time, it all happened in 98 to 2000, in that 2 year period. I think it did really shock a lot of people globally. It wasn't just in South Africa where there was shame felt. This was something that was not expected of the sport of cricket. This wasn't expected at all. Since the Hansi Cronje scandal, there's been multiple allegations, and of course we've seen that Pakistani England Test series with the spot fixing, scandal and the actual spot fixing, which took place with the no balls being bowled, and we've seen a couple of players banned and jailed, actually gone to prison. Sri Sant was one in India. There was an English bowler who played for Essex who went to jail for a while and got a ban. Alex Stewart famously come out and given interviews saying he was approached by a businessman or someone who claimed he was a businessman who offered him money to spot fix or match fix a game at county level. This is after he retired from Test cricket. Alex Stewart was approached by a man who had a suitcase and a duffel bag full of cash, actually showed him the money, saying, "Here's, I think it was like £50,000 or something, to fix a match in the car park of the Oval." Yes, actually at the Oval. Seems like Australia will play same as with India. Kiwis. Who do you reckon will be the captain? Because after World Cup debacle, Butler might retire. Honestly, I don't know. I don't. I don't follow cricket as religiously as I used to. So I'm very passionate about the sport, and I believe the sport should be made more accessible to more people, and that I think is where the TV deal comes in. But it just shows how hard it is to retain a World Cup. I wouldn't be surprised if New Zealand finally, and I mean this, I wouldn't be surprised if New Zealand do it. The way New Zealand do, looking at the match reports and how they've been playing, I wouldn't be surprised if New Zealand do it. They've been the most consistent side now in all forms of the game at international level for quite some time. And for their population size, you've got to think cricket's not their national sport. Most professional athletes end up being either a rugby union or rugby league player. Cricket is not the national sport, yet they consistently overachieve with willow and leather. Considering the population size, the amount of registered players, the amount of cricket clubs, New Zealand regularly overachieve, but they've been so consistent. When I say overachieve for the size of population. They've been so consistent now for so long. I think it was cruel the way they lost that World Cup final 4 years ago. I think we all agree on that. But no, they have consistently shown now for a significant period of time. I would say over the last 7-8 years how consistent they've been in all formats of the international game. They're great at Test level. They're great at 50 over 1 days and T20s. They have that consistency. I wouldn't be surprised if New Zealand do it. The Black Caps do it. In regards to Josh Butler, he's not consistent enough as a player. He's a great player on his day. He's not consistent enough, and I don't think he ever truly was captain material. That should be Ben Stokes. If you're going to select Ben Stokes and he's Test captain, why not give him the captaincy? Not that I'm a massive fan of Ben Stokes, but apparently he's not a violent thug, and he's not an abuser of disabled, and he doesn't mock, not a racist, but aspects. He's misunderstood, I think, is what he tries to say. But in reality, I'm not a massive fan of Ben Stokes. But if he's Test captain, why is he not ODI captain? Why have him in the 1 day sides and not give him a leadership role? I get that. I think the ECB will bring Ollie Pope in 1 day format and make him captain. Half of England's team is overage. I'm surprised Moeen Ali's come back into the international fold, considering he retired from the international game. I do think there's issues with depth in our bowling lineup a little bit, especially in the spin department. You do obviously need medium pace at some point. It's not a completely dead format of bowling. Medium fast is, I think, what we really need, like Paul Collingwood. You don't have a Paul Collingwood who's a genuine all-rounder in all facets of the game, playing every single bloody position and do a job, be a team guy. And I think England are living off the 2005 Ashes glory. It's like the same with the rugby union side, living off the 2003 World Cup win, and they're living off past glories, and they haven't. And the concern is that will participation levels continue to stagnate or fall? Because taking domestic Test cricket when England are playing Test matches at home off free to wear all those years ago has had a negative impact on the sport. They don't do that. The hundred's not a thing. The hundred is literally a reaction by the ECB to their greedy, short-sighted decision in 2005. The hundred only exists because the ECB shot themselves in the foot by being greedy, and it's designed for non-cricket fans to get them interested in the game. Yes, because you pissed off 10 million cricket fans who are no longer interested in the game, who were fans, both be it casual or reasonable fans who would support the national side and the T20 and one day versions of the game, because you took free to air coverage off the air. So you lost that casual fan base, you lost that potential growth fan base and participation and involvement at community level, at youth level, at grassroots, amateur, semi pro. You decided to put it behind a paywall, Mr. The ECB, so you reap what you sow. You'd be interested in hearing my opinion of the new International Rugby Union calendar after this Rugby World Cup. Well, it doesn't come in for a couple of years. I don't think it comes in for a couple of years. So the calendar's not going to change for the next 2 years, and then it comes in 2026. I'm not sold on it. It's coming across a bit Nations League-y, like UEFA have done. And it does make me question the future of the Lions Tour and whether we're going to have a Lions Tour every 4 years long term, 2 years after a World Cup. It does make me question the viability of the Lions now, and that's been questioned for a while. But it doesn't help the Lions Tours not free to air coverage, and you've got to pay for the nose to watch on Sky. But Lions Tours are the pinnacle of a Test player's career. Doesn't matter if you're the team being toured, so let's say South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, or you are selected to play for the Lions and therefore go on tour and represent the Lions. I think that's something that needs to be considered. The impact of this new international calendar on the game. I think it's also been brought in because the USA will be hosting a World Cup in 8 years' time, and then we're hosting a Women's World Cup in 10 years' time. I think that is also designed to get as much corporate money in and boost the game in the US. And this is where league and union are going to, union's doing all right in the US and Canada. This is where rugby league is going to have the problem, because the way the US has branded its professional game is Major League Rugby. That's automatically going to confuse potential new fans, because when I'm discussing on the channel, and I go on other channels and I say, well, you've got two forms of rugby, you've got union and league, and Americans are like, what? A lot of them just see highlight clips on YouTube or on whatever, and they don't distinguish between the 15-a-side game, which is union, and the 13-a-side game, which is league. I'm obviously more of a league fan than union, but I played more union than league. It's weird that. And according to the RFL, in the non-traditional locations, we don't exist as fans outside of the M62 corridor, because the RFL is backwards and protectionist and jobs for the boys and not fit for purpose. But that's my view on the RFL and how useless they are and how useless the Super League board is with their new TV, although they've agreed with Sky that's worth less money. So that's brain dead. So Sky Sports can basically kill rugby league in this country if they want to. In my opinion, it makes the Lions Tour more interesting because apart from the Lions Tours, tours are now practically dead, replaced by Nations Championships. Well, the traditional, tour, rugby union tour, died with professionalism at the top level in '95. They weren't truly dead till about 99, 2000, but no, for all intents and purposes, as soon as professionalism came, the old tour dynamic where the test side a test side will go on tour around the world, basically, for a 12-month stint. Yeah, the old tour dynamic died nearly 30 years ago. The Lions tour, I generally don't know how it's going to fit in with this new international calendar once it actually really gets established. But here's the thing: World Rugby, much like FIFA, um, much like the IOC with the Olympic program, it's jobs for the boys. It's it's not what you know, it's who you know, and that they're just chasing the money, and I don't think the revenue generated is gonna gonna be evenly distributed. And then we've got all these rule changes around tackle height and head contact. If we are to go by what we've seen in the World Cup, and then if we're going to go by what they're how they're altering the laws of the game, all they had to do was enforce the laws of the game originally, and they wouldn't have this concern about high tackles. Because unfortunately, for the best part now of 20-25 years, um, they've really not been. They've allowed. Well, there was some shocking play. You know, when I before I was born, there was some shocking play. I've seen some footage of play in the 80s and 90s, and then professionals. There was some shocking hits going in. And people go, "Oh, but the players are bigger now; they're more physical." Yeah, it doesn't matter. There was some real dirty play taking place in the 90s, but no, we've allowed bad tackle technique to get into the game. World Rugby is being reactionary rather than proactionary because they're scared of being sued out of existence. Because players who, well, gave out and received cheap shots, basically, bashed their heads with dirty play. That's deliberate head contact. Now going, "Oh, I've got brain damage." Well, here's the thing: don't go in with swinging arm. Actually, tackle properly. Who knew? If you tackle properly, you don't get concussed. Now there won't be a two-test tour, for example. The nation champion will play Argentina once, Africa once, Fiji once. It's that. Fiji, it's that. Oh, so basically, Fiji don't play any matches in Fiji. What's the point? There's no point there. That's ridiculous. Um, but no, World Rugby, as I was saying, is really now terrified of a massive lawsuit coming down because they didn't look after players. When players were clearly concussed, they were still allowed to play on. When players were clearly not 100% to return to play, they were playing. Team doctors and national doctors went, "Yeah, you're fit enough to play." But no, they're not. So it's not just head injuries, it's all injuries. So player welfare. And now World Rugby are like, "Shit, we're going to get sued. And we're worth more money now than what we were 20 years ago." And how many HIA assessments have we seen in this World Cup for head contact? Not enough. Not enough. Not anywhere near enough. Because if you are sin binning a player for drilling another player in the head, and that player who's basically been allegedly poleaxed, not going for an HIA, and that player who's tackled him or made the head contact should be in the sin bin. You are not sending the player who's basically been flattened with a head contact to have a head injury assessment, then how can you tell us fans that that player who's dished out the hit, accidental, deliberate, or otherwise, should go to the bin? You are not going to protect the player who is clearly hurt, clearly concussed by sending him. There's not been enough HIAs. They've gone soft on the HIAs, and they've literally now every head contact now. They're slowing the game down. We've got to have multiple replays, and the referee on the field goes, "I'm not so sure that you think has it. How does it?" Yeah, common sense for that winner. That's right. Fiji and Japan will have to base themselves in South Africa and Australia, where rugby have said so. Right. So that does not benefit Japan and Fiji. Japan have got the facilities. South Africa, they've got to keep the lights on during games. There's power cuts. It is ridiculous. Fiji, what's the point of trying to get them into tier one status? Japan hosted a World Cup, for Christ's sake. They have the facilities in place. They have the infrastructure in place. And this is the most brain dead. World Rugby just chasing the money for, like, we're making money here. World Rugby do not have a clue. Do not have a clue. This is where I think this entire tournament thing is completely all over the place. And then they're going to bring in, I think next year they're bringing the Pacific Nations Cup back. So the US, Canada, Fiji, Japan, Samoa, and Tonga will be playing in their version of the Five Nations, which they used to do anyway about a decade ago. And then World Rugby basically said, well, the US and Canada, you can now play in the American Rugby Championship, which they have never resumed, which is, again, brain dead. There's a reason why Tier 2 nations are really struggling to get to that next level and get enough test matches in between World Cups, in place. It's because their existing little competitions where they were playing each other regularly, so filling out the test calendar, don't exist anymore, or have been suspended or altered. And for Fiji to be having to be forced to be based outside of Fiji when they could play at home in front of a capacity crowd in their home country, which would be great for the game, by the way. Actually taking like a tier 1 nation to Fiji to play in Fijian conditions in the middle of a bloody cyclone would be hilarious. It really will be a leveler because the fans will be passionate and there, and that would really. I just don't. That is ridiculous. Romania used to have the Nations Cup. Now they've gone back because World Rugby has completely screwed up the international calendar. Completely screwed up. Bill Beaumont has been in charge of World Rugby for too long. And now they're coming up with these reactionary rule changes, which actually make the game even worse, not better. Because how much time has been wasted with these TMO reviews? Give the power to the on-field official, go, right, that is a clear dirty hit, that guy's off. You, 10 minutes, you, red, you're done. Let's not waste time looking at about 20 different replays, about 5 minutes, and they go, oh, it meets a threshold. Send the player off. If give power back to the on-field official, because they're now relying too much on the TMO to do their job for them. So they've got, I'll let the video ref do it. The video ref maybe what is not on the field, doesn't have a feeling for the back chat between the players, the chemistry between the players, how the game's actually been played, because he's sat in a box 200 miles away in Paris when the game has been played in Marseille, for example. 300 miles or whatever it is, 500 miles. So, and that's to take out bias. The guy is sat in a soundproof box, okay? Soundproof. And he's not even in the same stadium. Ridiculous. 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 I'm sorry, but it's unacceptable at a World Cup that the TMO is not even in the same stadium as the on-field officials because they might be, unduly biased because of the crowd. What a load of bollocks. Because that room is soundproof. They cannot hear what's going on outside. They just have the headset communication with the on-field referee. They will not be influenced by the boo or the jeering of the crowd. That is ridiculous. Ridiculous. And then, so they don't have a feel of the game at all. Could the pitch and weather conditions have an impact on it? Absolutely. We've seen players slip into tackles, but clearly there was no intent for the defending player to put a shoulder. All the tackles players would raise, well, when they raise an arm, that is actually deliberate. But this is what I mean. If we are to judge every single piece of head contact in a rugby union game, we'll never get a game played. Honestly, just might as well just say to the sport, stop playing them. The scrum is a mess. The scrum feed's a joke, by the way. The opposition hooker doesn't have to hook the ball anymore. Just shove it. Make them both hook the fucking ball. Make the scrum half feed the ball straight. And make all the props drive straight. As soon as one prop starts, off, let's get a front row that can, please. because coaches have basically taught. No, I mean the scrum's a mess. The scrum's been a mess for the best part of 20 years. The scrum half feed is so crooked that it doesn't matter if the hook is meant to hook the ball because it's going through the lock's legs. That is a joke. And what has happened is World Rugby, formerly the IRB, the International Rugby Board, have allowed over many, many years, because they just rebranded themselves World Rugby a few years back, didn't they? Because we'll rebrand because we can and waste a lot of money doing it. Because that's important, is changed our name. Okay, fine. Well, actually, rather than properly governing the game and making sure players played the game properly, because we've got the tackle technique is coached. Coached. It is coached. And here's the scary thing. When I was at school, I know for a fact that the kids my age and a bit below me, a few years below me and a few years above me, who were actively taking steroids because they were told to bulk up, get bigger, and they were being doped in their teenage years. They were actually on steroids. I'm not even going to deny this. This is a thing that was happening at school. That there were teenagers between the ages of 13 and 18 being fed anabolic steroids, growth hormone. It's a thing. Shocking, isn't it? It's true. Because they were told to bulk up and bulk up quick. And some of their body shapes inside. My mum, when she's picking up from school, was like, these lads are big. Like, not naturally big. And I was like, yeah. And this is no joke. We've had allegations of South African doping at high school. It's true. Look at Bronson Sherry in rugby league. He was doping from the age of at least 15 or 16. This is not an isolated thing in both modes of rugby or in sport in general. And I know for a fact that they were, giving teenagers roids because there were some of the lads in my year who were boasting about it. So, yeah, kids boast. Especially when they're getting special preferential treatment. They will show off that they're getting preferential treatment. They will show off. They will boast. And this was a thing. Now, whether that's still an ongoing thing, I don't know. I haven't been played rugby for 12 years. I haven't been to a rugby club in 12 years. So I have, but not on a rugby standpoint. But it was very noticeable watching kids my age and a bit younger just suddenly explode in size, and it's not called a growth spurt. They weren't getting taller; they were getting bigger. And we and the same thing was happening to my cousin, who's a couple of years younger than me. He was always a chubby lad, and then suddenly he just turned into a muscle of a brick shithouse. Basically, he went from a flabby prop to an outside centre. Let that sink in, and he suddenly lost all his fat, and he just turned into double my weight of muscle. And I'm a lean, I wouldn't say stringy, but I'm quite when I'm at the best peak performance. Back in the day, I was about 12, 13 stone of pure muscle when I was playing, and when I was keeping fit, and I am active, but I'm not, let's say, having the healthiest diet or whatever. But when I was at my healthiest, I was about 12 and a bit stone of muscle. My cousin was double that. He's the same height as me. He took 1 year out to go on a gap year, and he basically was told, if you don't lose your body fat, you're going to die. He got they were concerned he was going to have a heart attack at the age of 19, 20 years old, because he suddenly stopped, and the muscle around his heart started going flabby. Very ill. He had to completely change his diet. Now, He's still a sizable unit. He hasn't played rugby since university. I haven't spoken to him for several years, but I do remember he was told to bulk up, bulk up, bulk up. And because he already was quite a chubby lad, he went from a chubby, 11-year-old to a 15, 16-year-old who could bench press like 200 pounds. He could literally deadlift 150 kilos. Ridiculous. He could have been a fucking bodybuilder. He could have been a weightlifter. He went literally from. He basically turned into 22 stone of muscle. He was basically the size of Matthew Bastareaud without the fat. And I'm genuinely not joking. It was genuinely terrifying, the transformation in a very short amount of time. They were giving the kids fat burners, they were giving them roids, and it was very noticeable. Now, no kid's going to admit that to their parents that they're using. I should know I was an addict once. You never admit to being a user, you try and hide it. And yeah, no, I the problem I had is I couldn't keep the muscle the weight on. I've got a, but then that's what happens when alcohol and drug use becomes an issue. And that's one of the other reasons why I sort of decided not to play anymore. As I obviously had my addiction issues, but it has affected my metabolism. But I will say this: I there's a few of my friends who their physiology has changed drastically. There's going to the gym and there's doing the gym work and then there's doing the training on the field and then there's the sudden change in body shape, and it is noticeable that that is not human, kind of. And I look at some of these players in league, in union, in ice hockey, in NFL, and I look at their physiology, and I'm like, that's not quite right. You don't. There's going to the gym, and there's making sure that you're in shape, and there's making sure that your cardio is good, and that's the important thing is your cardio is good. And obviously your power to weight ratio and how you can. I'm not a big bloke, and I can tackle. It's all about how you use your power, use your weight and power and technique. You can be not the biggest guy. Factor Clerk proves this, and you can smash someone two, 3 times your size and smack them in half. You can drill a guy if you get your technique and your contact point right. But I look at some of these players, and to me, I'm like, especially with the NFL, especially with the NFL. Uh, it is a known fact in the NFL that there is a massive steroid problem, but they don't really test for it because it'd be embarrassing if the NFL was properly, with the World Anti-Doping Association and the US anti-doping authorities, if they was properly, test the NFL players, they'll have no players. 70% of the league would probably be done for having some kind of banned substance in their body that will either improve body mass, burn fat, increase muscle density, increase the blood oxygen levels, whatever it may be. It's a known thing. Let's not be ignorant about this. Let's not be naive. Um, but no, I do think that when we hear about failed drugs tests in rugby league and rugby union, it's majority recreational, and they seem to be targeted tests. So what happened with Bath and Matt Stevens and the whole Bath cocaine scandal? What happened, obviously, with Zach Hardacre? What obviously the peptides one is different, but that was again targeted. Bronson Sherry was targeted because all the other Cronulla players were fine. That's the thing. Bronson Sherry was a targeted test with evidence and someone doing a tip off. They wouldn't caught him otherwise because he'd been doping for years. But no, the size of some of these players, I mean, it makes me wonder. Um, is that just diet, gym work alone, cardio, and actually, or is there a bit more to this? Like, are those supplements they taking within the rules, like protein shakes and other, natural supplements to help boost, metabolism or build up muscle mass, or are they actually using some chemicals that aren't quite legitimate? because some of these players are just ridiculous sizes and shapes. And there is no doubt in my mind that World Rugby, the NRL, Rugby League, for example, Super League, the NFL, I have no doubt that they are fully aware that a proportion of their athletes are doping. No doubt. None. I know in the NHL they test twice a season, once in pre-season and once around Christmas. After that, they don't test. They don't test in the playoffs regularly, unless it's targeted. And they only test compulsory twice a year. And it's generally before Christmas is the second test. So if you want to do anything, do it Christmas week. It's a known fact. It is a known fact. They test once in pre-season, every player, and they test once regular season before the Christmas break or before the All-Star break, depending on how quick they're getting through the testing process. And players know this. So if a player is doing a lot of recreationals, they know, well, I've had a pre-season test. Let's see. Let's see when I'm going to be called in, and they will have a rough idea of what they can get away with. I'm trying to think the last NHL player to get a ban for steroids or performance enhancing. I can't think of one in the last 5 or 10 years. If there are any, they're not very high profile. I know there's a few who obviously had addiction issues. And Mike Ribeiro is the last one that stands out to me that's full blown not come back to the sport. Harry Price is another one, but he's had ongoing health issues. Or women's rugby with what performance enhancers. I watch a lot of women's rugby league, and they don't seem to be overly unnaturally sized in the sense of you know Serena Williams levels of suspicion. But again, Serena Williams has never failed a test, so I'm just going to put that out there. But there's always been that allegation against Serena Williams that she's somehow been doping and all that. I do watch a lot of women's rugby league, and there are some smaller players, and there are some bigger players. But there's none of them that I would say look unnatural with their body shape. They all look like they should. So if you've got a slightly taller player or a slightly chunkier player, they can see that is natural body mass, that's natural muscle, that's natural fat, that's their natural body shape. To me, none of them look like, oh, that one looks a bit two toned, or that one looks a little bit quicker than she was last year. She suddenly gained an extra couple of paces. Because I watch a lot of women's rugby league. I watch a lot of the players, and you see the players, week in, week out, and there are some of them that are, don't get me wrong, they are exceptionally fit, that they do their gym work, they do their cardio. I follow a few of them on Instagram. I follow a few of them. I used to follow a few of them on Twitter, and yeah, look, you can see that they are in shape and that they are fit to play. Got to be careful here because someone's going to say, "Oh, you're sexist." No, but you see, that they are healthy. The best way to describe it, and they are actually physically fit. They do their gym work. They do their cardio. They do their training. But there's not a single female player that stands out to me going, I have my suspicions about X, Y, and Z, that they may be doping in some way or using a performance enhancer in some way to gain an advantage, be it growth hormone or steroid or something to speed up their metabolism or something to there seems to be a pretty level balance. They generally are, I believe, clean. I generally believe that. The men's game, however, obviously is more well established. We have had players fail tests. There are players who failed with steroids or performance enhancers in their system, but it's very rare. I do know for a fact that out of the athletes who are under UK or world anti-doping bans, a lot of them are rugby players, and the majority of players currently on the banned list are Welsh. I think is it half of all athletes in the UK who are currently serving a doping ban or drugs-related ban of any substance are Welsh, and the majority of them are rugby players. They're the ones who are making up the majority of British athletes banned on Welsh. I've watched a documentary on it, and you can get a freedom of information request. It was, I think, was it Panorama or um, it was a BBC undercover investigation, and the female Welsh presenter was a former rugby union international for Wales, and it admittedly it was a few years ago. I don't know how much the numbers have changed in that time, but at the time, I believe it was in 2015 or 2019. It was before COVID. I remember that much. But at the time this documentary went to air, the majority of rugby players and rugby league players who were suspended for doping were Welsh, and the I think it was about 50% of all British athletes currently on the doping bans were Welsh. And most of them were rugby players. I think 80% of them were rugby players. So if you take the rugby players out of it, then that drastically reduced the number of Welsh athletes suspended. If you put the rugby players back in it, it makes a huge number of athletes based in the UK who are British or overseas athletes who were based in the UK who failed the test in the UK. Majority of them were Welsh. But we'll see if it does become an issue in women's rugby, and we'll see how rugby union and rugby league deal with it if and when it does start to become an issue. It'd be interesting to see which code would be more vulnerable in regards to female players doping. I would think rugby league seems to be better organised and more professional, and there's more money in women's rugby league than rugby union. It's growing at a faster rate, so there's more opportunity for players to actually play at a higher level and get game time and go through the system. Although there's more rugby union players, rugby league is growing at a faster rate in the women's game. That's what's crucial, the women's game. The international level is better in rugby union than league, but women's rugby league is growing at a faster rate in the last 5 years. So there's more opportunity now in rugby league to get on a team because they want to attract players over than rugby union. Now, if that means there's more opportunity, you want to get noticed, you're going to want to cheat. And now some of the best British players are going to Australia playing the NRLWs. There's clear opportunity, and there is a long-term plan to grow the game. So eventually, there's the same amount of teams in the women's game as there in the men's, and they will go. They are fully professional now, but they will have a better professional structure. Crowd numbers have been good. The quality has been good, yeah, I think rugby union probably would be a little bit more at risk than league at the moment. But then that might change in 5 years' time, and rugby league could be more vulnerable to doping than union. But it seems to me the growth of the women's game is suddenly accelerated in rugby league, and we're seeing a lot of union players go over to league to play. And so if there's more. So I think that's where rugby union could potentially be the one that, but it could be both codes, could be about equal. I just don't know. It's just my perception of what I see. But at the moment, when it comes to women's team sports, there's not a lot of doping cases that make make headlines. It's more the track and field athletics where we have doping issues. Um, Boxing seems to have a problem at the moment, um, especially with Conor Ben, obviously, with his failed doping test. When money comes into women's rugby, the temptation to cheat will increase. You could argue that. Both codes, you could argue that. But it depends how we're talking about cheating. Are we talking about throwing matches cheating, like match fixing? Are we talking because cheating is do we start influencing referees, like bribing a bribery of officials? We talk about both sets of players fixing a result. We talk about spot fix, like a player deliberately getting a sin bin or giving away a number of penalties and getting sent off. Are we talking about actually a player doping oneself? Because from what I can gather, the women's game is played in both codes, league and union. The way players approach it, they play the game how it should be played. Whereas the women's game is more refreshing to watch because they actually play it how it's meant to be played. That's basically how I see it. When I watch women's rugby union or women's rugby league, it is refreshing to watch because that's how the men's game used to be played. Now, yes, both sports are less professional. Professionalism is more of a newer thing, with players actually getting paid decent wages to play. And rugby league, for example, they've just the NRLW got their CBA, so now they have more protections and better wages. And the goal is to make all women players in the NRLW, NRLW players, fully professional, and the average salaries to go up, which they are. So they are getting decently compensated. I wouldn't say the temptation necessarily goes up. It's all about how you make sure that the education's there, um, and the punishments fit the crime. Because what we're seeing now is longer bans for doping. What we'll see potentially with these football betting allegations is their length of bans could be very interesting. And Ivan Toney, I would think, would be, precedent's been set in England at 8 months with an early plea, and Joe Barton got 18 months. So you've got a 10-month gap, basically, difference between what Ivan Toney was recently given last season and what Joe Barton received a decade ago. There is a bit of a discrepancy there, but less than 2 years, year and a half ban max, half year ban thereabouts, average. I think one of the Italian players involved in the current betting scandal has got 7 months. So the Italian FA is working on a similar framework to the English FA. Joe Barton was suspended by both the Scottish and English FAs, so maybe that's why they combined the bans together. I don't know. That's gambling, cheating, betting on games, and potentially impacting results that way. Stuart Bingham, he got 6 months for rule breaches in snooker. And then we look at these match fixing bans, and they're all over the place with that kind of cheating. All over the place. Anywhere from John Higgins getting a fine, which he did actually get. John Higgins got a fine for his alleged accepting bribes and match fixing, all the way up to life bans. Stephen Lee obviously getting 10 years, basically life ban. So that's on gambling cheating. Then we're going to get to, obviously doping cheating. We're now seeing suspensions now hitting 4 years. Bronson Sherry is an example. Back in the day, it used to be about 2 years. Now it's gone up to 4 for the more top end ban. And then, of course, we've got the recreational drug use as well. And that, we're talking about transitioning and so being trans athletes. Well, if you're going to take a cut in pay, it wouldn't make any sense now, would it? Because you can be an average team squad guy and get paid X amount. The top paid women's athletes get paid a lot less. So why would you take a pay cut? Let's be honest. Men protecting women. Where have we seen that? Dame Edna. Apart from Lily Savage and Dame Edna, so two comedians in drag, Paul O'Grady and the Australian guy. Both sadly now passed away, which is very, very sad. Um, I think we have to have common sense debate. Unfortunately, common sense has left the room some time ago, but we do need to have a common sense debate. And I've always said, give them a trans category. I've never met a member of the LGBTQ plus community who's not a who really is a hardcore. I met a few who are actually are sports fans, and I met those who are not interested. But I've never met any of them who've gone, you know what? I want to, you know, transition. I've known a few to do that, but now I want to, get involved and play men's sports, women's sports, the opposite gender they were born to. You could be an amateur male player and transition to be an elite woman athlete. There's no pay. True, and then we start raising questions then of the integrity. I do think this sets back women athletes and women's rights back. I think it does. I think we're on a very we're on dangerous ground because I think it does set women's rights back, both in the world of sport and in general civil rights. I think while we're pandering to one group, we're weakening another group, and there are a lot of women who are members of the LGBTQ plus community, and I think we are potentially undermining their civil rights for the sake of an even smaller group of people in society, or a subsection of. I think we're on a very dangerous ground, but common sense has left the building quite some time ago. And if you say you don't feel comfortable with a trans athlete competing, a male who's going to transition to a female competing with women, apparently you're a transphobe. No, it's all common sense because a biological male can hit harder, like boxing, or tackle harder. That'd be a rugby union, rugby league. Can run faster. Has a different body mass index. Different muscle density. That their muscles are more dense. Better cardio. Just because he's now got a pair of tits and has cut his dick off, they're going to go that far. They've already developed their muscle mass. So when you will have to obviously have progesterone and G-stroke patches and all that medication. But you've already developed your leg muscle mass. Your shoulders are wider. You've already developed all that muscle mass and the body development. So automatically you're putting those female athletes at a disadvantage and potentially serious injury. We've seen it in boxing and kickboxing and cage fighting where a transitioned athlete has nearly killed a female athlete in the ring. Well, I do remember there was it was a Senate hearing, and a university student from I forget which university swimming program went before a Senate committee hearing and basically said the majority of us were not comfortable with this. It wasn't because the guy basically identified as a woman, had not gone through any kind of procedures medically, just said, I just felt like a woman. I want to, and was allowed into their changing rooms to change, and they felt uncomfortable. When they raised concerns about their welfare, they were shut down. They were, you know, not listened to, said they were the problem, and then they had to go on a re-education course. We are going down a very, very slippery slope when it comes to women's rights and women's safety, very slippery slope. And when we come to women's sport, it devalues it completely. It makes a mockery of their sport, which they're competing in. So we'll go for swimming, we go for cycling. It does devalue all the struggles that they've had to get recognition in their sport. I mean, women's football was banned for a long time. It was officially banned. So those early pioneers of women's rugby, of women's football, of women's rugby league, setting up community teams, actually, playing women's state of origin in Australian rugby league, for example, the AFL, women's Aussie rules. All of these pioneers who had to face a lot of obstacles to get funding, to get sponsorship, to get equipment, to get leagues organised, to get teams organised, to get community outreach, to engage with existing men's clubs to say, do you want a women's team? There's enough, interest here to set up a women's program. It undermines all that. It does. But there appears to be this very small minority of the LGBTQ plus community that is actually undermining their own community. They're undermining the civil rights movement by undermining a huge part of it, which is women. It doesn't matter what sexuality these women are and what orientation these women are, you're undermining yourselves by some of these ludicrous arguments saying, well, if a guy wants to say he's a woman, he's a woman. In that case, I'm a toaster. Because this is how ludicrous it is. I'm a penguin who I identify as a penguin who identifies as a toaster. This is the ludicrousness of it. While I massively dislike Piers Morgan, I agree with him on this one. This is ludicrous. This is fundamentally undermining, especially with women's sport, but the hurdles they've had to get through to get to this point where they're now being recognised as professionals in certain aspects of sport, where they've had to struggle to get funding, where they had to go with very, very poor health insurance and match day payments. They've had to pay for their own equipment in regards to training at facilities. They've had lack of funding. They've had, they've had to have rules changes so they can have, after the age of 11, they can have senior teams, because before you stopped playing at 11 until you were 18. So there was 7 years of athlete development that was lost. They've had to get over social prejudice. They've had to get over sexism, bigotry, whatever you want to name it. And that is all being undermined by a very small minority of white middle class liberals, because that's what it is, who are not doing very well at university, but think they know the entire world without actually living in the real world, because mummy and daddy and their trust funds have paid for their university education. They're mostly privately educated, white and middle class. And they're pretty fit because they don't live in the real world. And they want to tell me that common sense, which would say, want to have trans athletes? Have a trans category. Most gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people I know who are sports fans have no inclination of saying, well, you know what? I'm going to identify as the opposite gender, and then I'm going to play a team sport or an individual sport against and with the opposite gender that I now identify as. I've never met anyone, and I've got relatives who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. I've got friends who are part of the community. I've not met any of them who go, you know what? Today I'm going to identify as a man or woman, opposite gender, and then I'm going to sign up for a sports team. I've never. So this is a social media thing. This is a very. It's mostly university led. and it's driven by social media. And unfortunately, common sense has left the debate because I feel it is undermining women's rights, undermining women's sport drastically. It makes a mockery of it when they've made massive strides, and they still face challenges today. And I look on social media, and I look at some of the sexist comments women football players have to face. Um, Considering how well the England women's team has done in the last few years, the torrent of abuse they have to face on the day. It's embarrassing as a sports fan. It's embarrassing as a man to see it. Um, and yeah, I do agree. Some of the media coverage is painful, and some of the quality of commentary and punditry is painful. But the women's team, the England's team, has done fantastic things. Like back-to-back finals, winning one, runners up in another. They've done, they've grown the game fantastically. They've broken records for attendance, viewership. They've brought success when the men's team have failed since 1966 at senior level. Um, and the continued abuse that they face, ridiculous. The NCAA system and the student athletes, as they're known, because until very recently, the NCAA basically was claiming that these athletes weren't getting endorsements. These athletes were on sports scholarships, so they were students. They basically sort of admitted that they were professional about 3, 4 years ago. It weren't very long ago, and they're called student. I mean, South Park did the best piss take of the whole NCAA system, where Cartman dresses up as a Civil War era plantation owner, of and he goes in and he said, "I'm willing to pay this much for a white student athlete and this much for an Afro American student athlete, Black American." And it's basically saying, well, okay then, these are basically professionals with no payment. And South Park is obviously tongue in cheek. It's risque humour. It's ridiculous, basically. But it's basically taking the piss out of the NCAA. It's the same with Family Guy with some of their you know random jokes, or American Dad with some of their skits. It it's just and just Team America is the ultimate parody of American society. But it's true. Um, the NCAA universities were exploiting their students who were athletes and sports scholarships, um, and are making a lot of money off them, huge amounts of money. So, yeah, I mean, you can say because you've got a minority in your sports program, you get extra funding as well. So the colleges, the NCAA university system, they will exploit this for extra funding because you've got a minority group athlete. So an athlete who may be from a minority background, be it religious, national, ethnic, or sexual orientation. A minority background gets you extra funding. It's a fact. People have been abusing that system when you go in and you apply for a job or you apply for benefits and they ask you your background. Certain backgrounds get extra funding when it comes to job searching, childcare, education, get preferential treatment. It's called positive discrimination. It's like the Rooney Rule in the NFL. So the NCAA know this, and they will get extra funding because they've got a minority demographic on their sports program. And so when I forget which university it was, I think it was the University of Pennsylvania. Can't remember which university it was. When the head of the when the women's swim team representative, her fellow teammates had said, "Look, you're the one who's basically the best public speaker. You're the one who can really convey the message and the emotion of the situation." When she was reading out her evidence and the team's evidence of their And they listed all their complaints. They had it all on file. And the way she basically, like the university, did not take our concerns seriously. We were very concerned about, is this appropriate? Basically, a fully grown bloke claiming he's a woman, but has had not had a sex change. So this guy is just a bloke with his dong in their changing room, using their bathrooms. Um, and then they were told, and then when they raised their concerns, saying we don't feel comfortable with a male athlete, but a biologically male athlete in the women's changing room, and on, you know, we were, we feel uncomfortable. They were basically told that they were transphobic. They were told that they were being bigots and derogatory, and they were the ones cast as the bad guys. They were not consulted on this athlete joining the program. They were not consulted on the situation in regards to change of women and use of facilities. They weren't consulted on any of the situation, but they were told to, deal with it. Basically, they were raising concerns about their own welfare, ignored. Um, they were basically put on a re-education camp, a re-education program about why they were bigots, when in reality, not a single one of them had ever made an inappropriate comment or made the biologically male identified as a female athlete uncomfortable. They had not, physically attacked the athlete. They had done nothing, absolutely nothing untoward to this individual. Yet they were labelled as bigots and as transphobes and as homophobes because they raised legitimate concerns in regards to, we were not consulted that this was going to happen. We were told that we had to get on with it, and they basically said that the university had ignored them and had labelled them all these things and labelled them as the bad guys. And common sense left the room because the university was getting extra funding. It was in, and of course they get sponsorships as well. The university was making money out of this situation. And they also felt, these female athletes felt devalued because, they just felt devalued. They were not listened to. They were, I think several of them quit the program, which obviously has an impact on their own finances because the university is expensive in the US. Some of them actually quit the program. I forget which American university it was, but I found them. I've watched the video multiple times, and it was listening to this young, swimmer, this young student. She must have been in late teens, early 20s. I mean, we're talking maybe 21 or 22 at a push. You know, in a room in front of all these media and lawyers and politicians, basically saying this is what was happening in our program. And she just listed all the things. And quite frankly, the way the university just said, deal with it. This is your new team. This is your new team, mate. There you go. I mean, the university got extra funding out of it. Basically, what it boiled down to. They were only interested in the fact that they were open to a minority background getting onto the sports program, which I've got nothing against. Having an openly gay athlete doesn't bother me. But basically, the university was using it as a PR exercise, saying that we've got a transgender athlete, a women's swim team, it's all good. We're an open organisation, we're pro everything. But in reality, they were shoehorning and gaslighting their female swim team. And even their male counterparts were in support of their female counterparts, going, this is wrong. This is not right. They were basically saying we're an inclusive organisation. Here's your new teammate. Let's see how this works out. In reality, they were just doing it for the money. They were doing it for the funding. They were doing it for the tax breaks. They were doing it for whatever. And they were gaslighting their athletes. They didn't listen to their athletes' concerns. I'm not saying that this trans athlete has done anything wrong in any way. The university has done wrong. This is where you need to have a trans, a trans category, because especially in the US, which is such a diverse country with cultures and religions and various levels of atheism or religion, and such a melting pot of society, you're going to have these issues. This is a test case. But the way and with the sincerity that this young woman spoke, and I generally forget where I found the. I think it was on Instagram. I think it was on Instagram or Facebook. Yeah, no, I when I last, I remember when I had to do some online forms. I forget what form. I generally forget what I have to do online forms for, but they asked me my sexual preference. All I'm doing is, I think it was for my ADHD. Was it for my ADHD assessment or my mental health? When I was not well a couple of years ago, I had to do some medical forms, and they were asking my sexual orientation for a mental health assessment. I wasn't aware that that could be relevant to making sure that I have bipolar or not bipolar, and I'm just a little bit depressed. How does my sexual orientation affect what medication you're going to give me? Like, seriously, how does my religious background impact, or lack of, or my nationality impact what medication you're going to give me? How is that relevant? But they have to put it on there. So basically, we're being gaslit. We're, and it's the same in school. Um, oh God, they're afraid of getting sued, so they have to put these silly things. You can just put prefer not to say on everything. Just say, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you." A lot of it's to do for advertising as well, because they will put that into their computer system, and then when you get promotional adverts and they sell your data, they can sell aspects of your data. So when you're on the internet, or you get those promotional text messages and emails, a lot of it's data harvesting, and they can target advertising at you. So they work out, okay, he's male, early 40s, white, British. Let's give him a car ad. Oh, this guy might be at the, oh, he's joined a gym. Oh, he's going to be middle class. Let's target him with a credit card ad. Um, Honestly, they ask you a marital status. Like, you go to the gym. What is it if you've got a wife, you're single, you're engaged, whatever? How, some of these questions are. It was the same when I was going to the job centre about 10 years ago, and they were asking when I was applying for jobs, because there is the Anti Discrimination Act. Well, then you already, some of these are just, and it's just the Equalities Act. That's the one. The Workplace Equalities Act. Or I think it's the Equalities Act. And I'm thinking, I just might just make something up here and say I'm black Chinese. I'm an albino, black Chinese, lesbian, just to see what would happen, because it's irrelevant. It is irrelevant. Background and colour and religion and sexual orientation should not in any way, shape, or form, and whether you are qualified for the job or qualified to be signed by a sports team or to coach a sports team, should have nothing to do with it. For the NHS, I tell them my race because I didn't have like vaccines. Uh, only in certain aspects, if it honestly depends. But no, I mean, my uncle did actually tell me because my uncle's kids are half Japanese, half English, and I do remember this because they were going through a process for catchment area for schools and all that, and obviously child benefit at the time, and they had to get the forms to fill in for child benefit, and so basically my cousins look like they're Filipino. They're not. They're half Japanese, half English because of their DNA makeup and physical features. They look like they're from Southeast Asia, so they get a lot of that. And this is really funny. And my uncle told me that the rarest ethnic group in this country is Black Chinese. There are only, I think, 300 Black Chinese children in the country or something. And that's on the form. So when you get, sure start placements and when you get your nursery placements and funding per child head, if you are of a minority group, you get extra funding. So if you tick Black Chinese for your kid, you can get extra funding. So you'll like free child meals, you get an extra free child meal in there, or extra childcare and things like that. It's a thing. People were gaming the system, and so yeah, he found out. I don't know how he found out, but my uncle will go down a wormhole on the internet, and he will be on the internet, will go down a wormhole, and he'll come out 2 days later thinking that aliens are injecting computer chips into the back of our retinas to control us, and that the Illuminati is controlling the world government, like puppeteers, that kind of thing. My uncle will be going, researching, just reading up on, JFK, and then it will come out that the Illuminati are inside Prince Charles's head. He's that kind of conspiracy theorist, but he did find out somehow that the um, tick Black Chinese. There's only apparently, according to studies or someone can figure this out. There's like 300 Black Chinese kids or something in the UK. It's like for funding. It's also the rarest mixed race group in the world. How that's a thing it is, but it's a thing. I just how is that relevant? It's all about funding. It's all about getting money. And I've noticed, and I've realised, I've gone off on a massive tangent. We were talking about doping in women's rugby, and we've ended up on the trans athlete debate. And no, but it's true. I think common sense has left the room, and female athletes are being gaslit by sporting organisations, their universities, their clubs, their sports governing bodies, and they are raising legitimate concerns about not only the trans athletes' welfare, but their own. And they're not being consulted about, the situation. They are raising legitimate concerns, and they're basically being told they're homophobes, basically, or they're transphobes. Um, they've raised concerns about of the appropriateness of having a biological male with all his bits and pieces in the same changing room, using the same bathrooms, the same shower units as them at the same time. There's a reason why we have men's bathrooms, women's bathrooms, women's changing rooms, men's changing rooms. And they have raised legitimate concerns about that. Some of them felt uncomfortable, especially getting, in I honestly, I genuinely forget where I watched this video clip. And yeah, it was hard hitting listening to this young, female athlete. Basically, she was almost in tears at one point. You could hear it in her voice that this is clearly not only impacting her, but it was impacting her teammates on the team. And yeah, the university basically said they were the ones in the wrong, refused to accept any responsibility for the situation that was created. And it did have a negative impact on that team. I have no doubt that swim team was going to struggle at every swim meet that they competed in. When it was coming for selection for the national side, I bet you those swimmers were not performing at peak performance. And when we hear about the win at all costs mentality, and the stories that are now coming out about various Olympic and World Championship programs in the UK and scandals of bullying, harassment, sexism, and whatever it may be, this comes down into the crux of it. Athlete welfare, doesn't matter what the situation is, has not been a priority. It's a win at all costs mentality. We've had it. A lot of the European nations have had it. The Chinese, obviously have these athlete factories where they take kids from a young age and put them in these training schools to train them up for the Olympic programs. And now we know what's going on in the US, various sports. This is a serious thing. That athlete welfare has not been put first in a lot of sports, especially on the Olympic program and the World Championship programs for the IOC and various other programs. And then we're hearing about, obviously, some of these other sports, like rugby union with their new international calendar. I mean, we're talking about player workload and loading, player loading, right? And balancing their workload, limiting the amount of games a player can play in a year. Well, that goes out the window with this international calendar. I know I should be doing sports if they're not enjoying it. When obviously there's a reason why, for example, the swimmers that I'm talking about, I think it was the University of Philadelphia. I think could be wrong there. It's not the University of Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. It was an NCAA college on the east. I believe it was on the eastern seaboard of the US. Obviously, there's a reason why they signed up for the program. They signed up for the swim program. They've obviously, these are all talented swimmers. They've enjoyed swimming from a young age. Obviously, this is the sport choice for them. And suddenly, for some reason, this university decided this is a policy that they're going to pursue. And whether the coaches were consulted about it, I don't know, but the athletes weren't. And the athletes' concerns were disregarded at every stage in the process. And but when we're talking about athlete welfare, we've seen various athletes basically say that their mental health has been impacted by various things. The Scottish speed skater, whose name eludes me at the moment, with her mental health struggles and just, she doesn't seem to. I hate to say this, but her mental fortitude isn't there, and she can't deal with criticism. And that's legitimate criticism, saying, well, you didn't perform very well. Why have you peaked in the World Championship cycle rather than the Olympics? What's going wrong? How about you change your training program? How about you? And she always got very, very emotional. And then we look at some of these male, athletes and players in various sports, and some of their antics. You can clearly see it's mental health related, and they're not being looked after, and they're not being guided in the right way. And then Elise Christie, that's it. She clearly had mental health struggles and didn't deal well with pressure. And for some reason, the World Championships always did really well. The Olympics, absolute disaster. Could never get it right. And for some reason, every 2 years she was really good, and every 2 years she was really bad. But the World Championships, less people are paying attention to the World Championships. It's not yes, it's a global event, but it doesn't get press coverage. The Olympics, more spotlight, more intrigue, more pressure, crumble. And she couldn't take criticism of, well, you're not getting your training right, you're not preparing right, but at the same time, you then look at the social media crap she was getting, rather than just saying, well, we have to question her preparation, we have to question her training, we have to question her coach a little bit, because her coaching setup is vital here. Some of the crap she got on social media was wrong, but I think if she's getting Olympic funding, which does come from the taxpayer and the national lottery, I think we have a right as fans to go, "You're getting some of your funding from my pocket. What's going on here? This is not the first time this has happened." Um, but then we look at, um, some of these male athletes who go off the rails with the drinking, the drugs, and the gambling. So Ivan Toney, for example, and Tonali, who got gambling addictions, Michael Chopra. And clearly, again, they weren't being looked after and advised properly. And again, I look on social media and on the mainstream, media when you have your say thing, on BBC websites, stuff. And some of the comments are like, well, you know, yes, they breached rules. Yes, they you know ended up breaching betting rules. But they haven't attempted to fix matches. This is gambling addiction, which is a sign of a mental health problem. Most likely ADHD undiagnosed, bipolar undiagnosed, or and ADHD is just a dopamine imbalance. It's not a mental health issue. It's a dopamine issue that your body's not producing the right amounts at the right times. Um, but can lead to mental health aspects. But sports seem to punish rather than I wouldn't say educate, but look after. The leaders of netball in this country want it to become professional in the next couple of years. They need to understand the professionalism. Oh, you can be an amateur and take criticism. When you're in the public eye, appearing at world championships, at World Cups, Olympics, Commonwealth, when you're in the public eye at these major sporting events where there is media attention, um, you are going to take some criticism. What has happened though is social media has taken criticism to just abuse. That's the difference. This is where I think in the last decade and a half, with the growth of social media, especially what is now known as X, Twitter, I would love to see that website disappear completely. That's where most of the toxicity lies is on the platform formerly known as Twitter, which Elon Musk now owns and hopefully will destroy himself, hopefully financially, because he's a Bond villain, but that's a topic for another day. That's where most of the unbalanced discourse lies. And then other websites, be it mainstream news, where they have leave your comments in the comment section, or YouTube, seem to be a bit more balanced because moderators exist. Because as you're one of my moderators. I've chosen you because you regularly appear in comment sections. We can disagree on certain aspects. We don't always agree on everything, but we keep things as civil as possible while common sense applies. And that's great, is that you can appoint your own moderators. And like, YouTube will have those, certain words that are tagged as that's offensive. So there is also that spam filter and review filter in my studio app. So I can double check and read both of these. Um, but no, the social media aspect, Twitter especially, has given a voice to morons who really shouldn't have that kind of uh, um, responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. I don't think level players get a hard time now, except for idiots comparing to men's basketball. They're two different sports that have a similar origin. They're court sports. But no, I think they the netball governing body needs to be very, very aware of what is happening with social media, especially with sports stars on social media. They're very public figures. Tracy Neville, obviously, her brothers are Gary and Phil Neville, ex-football players. She's a very public figure um, in the world of sport. She's very well known. I wouldn't say she's a household name, but she's well known with a lot of sports fans and a lot of the sports media. Um, and I think it'd be vital for her input in regards to netball going fully professional in this country, and some of the pitfalls, especially with social media, and therefore, you know, educating players about social media use. Basically, encourage them maybe to get rid of their Twitter or maybe get rid of their Instagram or get rid of their adjust their Facebook settings so I friends and family, that kind of thing. Um, I got rid of my Twitter before it became X. I got rid of that. Don't miss it. I got rid of my Snapchat ages ago. Um, Never had TikTok. I've got my Instagram, I've got my Facebook, but I might be getting rid of my Facebook, my personal Facebook, and just having on the channel at this point. Um, I look at, Facebook is nearly, I mean, Instagram is pretty toxic to be fair. Some comment sections, I'm like, this is bad. There's dark humor, and then this is pushing the boundaries of acceptability. Um, and I will say this: Facebook and Instagram is getting out of hand, but it's nowhere on the level of what Twitter is, which I call the sewer of humanity, the cesspit of humanity. And the amount of professional athletes who the constant crap they get, um, it became very disheartening looking at the fact that there was, yeah, it just was such a toxic atmosphere on that platform that I much rather have Piers Morgan say something disgusting than listen to someone and read and look at. You know, again, common sense and common sense debate has gone out the window. Um, and now we're getting some. And a lot of professional sports and amateur sports and those Olympic sports are very, very noticeable that they've got a public image to uphold. So again, corporate money, sponsorship is vitally important to them as well. So the more they can be seen as lovey-dovey, everyone's welcome. Um, Basically, what I call champagne socialism, where multi-millionaire football players, you know, um, say they're all for equality for the LGBT and minority communities in this country, then they go and sign in Saudi Arabia and now are part of the Saudi Arabian bid for the 2034 World Cup. That's gone down like a sack of shit. Um, Jordan Henderson has gone down in my book. He claims he's on the side of the minority groups and the LGBTQ plus community. He's taken a massive paycheck and now he's the mouthpiece of the Saudi Tourist Board. It's a joke. It's called hypocrisy of the high. These are champagne socialists. Do as we say, not as we do. So I'm I'm very wary when an athlete now is the front of a charity campaign or a civil rights campaign now because it's champagne socialism. I cannot take them seriously. Um, it's more like, yeah, champagne socialism. It's all for that ego boost where I'm helping, I'm helping. No, you're not. You're just increasing your Instagram following to get some likes or whatever. The world was a much better place before social media really became what it is. I think MySpace was a decent platform. I think YouTube is, for the most part, a decent platform. Um, yeah, I know, but I've heard about Paul Scholes and his daughter's Instagram and stuff getting a bit, it's nearly on OnlyFans level. Um, and obviously, Gary and Phil Neville, their sister, used to be her coach. So, you know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, the fact that Gary and Phil Neville's sister was Paul Scholes' daughter's netball coach, it, it, yeah, I mean, they are a close group of mates. They all came through the same class of '92. They're in the football club together, and yeah. But it's like Michael Owen's daughter going on Love Island. Um, that was really uncomfortable. I don't watch Love Island, but that I wouldn't be comfortable if my daughter was to do that. Let's just say that. I wouldn't feel comfortable. But at the same time, it's her choice. That'll be a different conversation. But and I would have obviously say it's your choice. And you do what you want to do. But I don't have to be comfortable while you do it, and I can have my reservations. But no, I mean, it's the modern age though. I think social media and some of these sites and apps have definitely skewed what is and isn't acceptable. Um, I suppose it's a generational thing. I mean, I'm in my mid thirties. My birthday in 5 weeks, but I'm in my mid thirties, and when I was, a kid, growing up, teenager, I was more interested in going on my BMX into the woods, and, you know, setting off firecrackers and running around because MySpace didn't exist, Facebook didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist. None of these social media platforms existed when I was growing up. Yeah, I had my PlayStation, I had my PS2, and I had PC games and my DVDs and my books, my videos, and all that. But I even had a Horby train set, which I still have. But to me, I went around my mates' houses and play on the N64 or the Xbox or whatever console it was. We played Warhammer, and we did the Warhammer models and all that. And it, now I had a pretty cool childhood until I was about 13, 14. Pretty cool. I would play five-a-side football with mates, you know, and then social media started to become a thing. And I do honestly believe it's had a negative impact on society. Now, I'm not saying YouTube is all bad because without YouTube, you don't have me, doing this channel, which I actually enjoy a hell of a lot. Um, I think there's more positives and negatives than YouTube, but YouTube has had its controversies. But some of the other social media platforms, and I will say this, have had more of a negative than a positive contribution. MySpace, I think, was a positive. It did have a lot of positive aspects to it, but it's no longer with us, which is a massive shame because I believe it was the better platform. It was more of a positive social media platform. Um, Twitter, I never really liked Twitter to begin with. I never liked its user interface for one. And to be honest, I never really enjoyed it. I never really used it. I used it for the channel basically. Why I had it, and it didn't really help the channel grow at all. It didn't have a positive impact on the channel's growth or getting view counts or shares. Or I look at the data now for the channel. I go on my analytics, and it tells you where people are sharing stuff. So WhatsApp, for example, or Instagram, Facebook, or whatever. People are not using Twitter at all to share the videos. But a lot of people are sharing on their Facebook or on their Instagram uh, or their WhatsApp. Some are sending it by email. People are sharing my content, but not on Twitter. So, and that's been very noticeable. Was when Elon Musk announced his interest in buying Twitter. Suddenly, people, yeah, I'm not using the platform. And as the time has gone on, viewers of this channel, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Well, she's not doing anything illegal. I think the netball governing body might have something to say if it brings their sport to disrepute. If she gets involved in some kind of scandal, or less appropriate footage emerges, like someone gets hold of more inappropriate images, like we're talking fully, you know, in the buff, then her sports governing body may go, we need to have a chat here. I wouldn't be surprised if whether it's semi-pro, professional, whatever status the sport is in, amateur, semi-pro, professional, whatever. If sponsors may go, we're not comfortable with this, We're trying to obviously attract families to watch the sport, kids to play the sport. Um, this is not what we want our products associated with. That happens with scandal. Scandal can impact when sponsors and corporates go, we don't want to invest our money. We've seen it on YouTube. We've seen it on YouTube with when Jake and Logan Paul had all their scandals. And that YouTuber in Japan the other day, fare hopping, not paying his train and bus fare in Japan. He eventually got arrested. And then he continued to be an absolute moron. There's another one. I forget her name, but she's doing. Um, I'm not saying she can't do it, but the netball governing body, my global sponsors, are starting to get a bit concerned here. We may lose a sponsorship deal with, I don't know, a washing up like Ariel, for example, Persil, maybe. Like we may be willing to whatever. I think of herbal essences. There you go. There's another one, like PPG. Some of these toiletry brands and kitchen brands and cleaning products, things like that. I'm just using them as an example. Um, they may go, well, we're aiming for young families to buy our products. We're not comfortable with this footage appearing of your athlete, and then the governing body go, we're going to lose money here. And then it also the image of the sport being a family-friendly sport, and aimed at women and young girls, and then this happening, like this is bringing the sport to disrepute, and then it creates negative. Um, well, she hasn't posted anything in February. There can be multiple reasons for that, but I think it's only becoming a real big issue because of who her dad is. If her dad wasn't Paul Scholes, I suddenly don't think this is as blown up as massively as it is. Because her dad's Paul Scholes and he's a household name with a lot of sports fans. No, Anna Kournikova, I think, is the tale of the past. Is a warning from sporting history. Anna Kournikova, obviously, there's some very famous photos of Anna Kournikova with not a lot of clothes on, warming up playing tennis with bits and pieces showing that shouldn't be in the public domain necessarily. And Anna Kournikova would be that warning from history. Very talented player, there's no doubt. But obviously, the off-court stuff was where all the headlines were made, and she did make a lot of money from modeling. Not deny that, but she didn't achieve the level expected of her in professional tennis. But it did create controversy, and controversy then creates headlines, which then creates interviews, which you get paid for, and then creates potential other sponsorship deals with, let's say, a perfume company or a clothing company. Goes that we like this risk taking, we're aiming this for this demographic of people. So sometimes there can be commercial opportunities out of scandal. But Anna Kournikova didn't achieve what she could have achieved in tennis because she spent more time doing glamour model shoots and her private life and all that. So she didn't achieve what she could have done in her chosen profession, but she got a pretty decent modelling career out of things. And I wouldn't say Anna Kournikova's done bad in life. She's made quite a bit of money. She's worth quite a bit. No, as I say, if it wasn't Paul Scholes' daughter, I don't think this is getting any media attention, and we're not having a discussion, and we're not talking about her Instagram now. Whether Netball UK or Netball England have basically gone to her coaches and gone to her team. Her team as well might have said something because they will have a team Instagram, they'll have a team Twitter, they'll have a team Facebook page. And of course, she's associated with her club team and the national side, and they've probably gone, we have a code of conduct here. We are a family friendly sport. We want to attract new fans, we want to attract families to games, we want to get this professional status. We want to grow the sport. We want positive headlines, not negative headlines. Now, as I say, like there's some of the women rugby league players have some pretty raunchy Instagrams. Like I'm not going to say which players, because I think that's unfair on them because it's their personal Instagrams, but some of them have some pretty raunchy stuff. Um, and these are the NRLW players, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, but they still continue to post some of this particularly raunchy stuff. You're thinking, well, they're not being called up on it. Maybe Australian society views things differently to British society in regards to what a female athlete can and can't do outside of her sport that she participates in. She's not done anything wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if her coaches have had a word with her or her teams have had a word in there. But as I say, and as you say, if it wasn't Paul Scholes' daughter, they want to attract females to gain families on purpose. Well, yeah, some of the people I work with are a bit pervy, not gonna lie. But no, I mean, look, you can be a male fan and go and watch women's sport and support a women's team because you enjoy watching sport. I love watching women's rugby league and women's rugby union. I prefer women's rugby league, to be fair, because the way that they play it is refreshing. They play the game the right ways. They don't need the 6 again rule because there's no wrestle on the floor. They actually play the game properly. Um, and yes, there are a lot of families in attendance, and yeah, there's a lot of dads and brothers and uncles and boyfriends and friends who are male in attendance watching, you know, their their girl play the game, which is good. Um, but I think it's more the fact that it because they're trying to attract because there's been a survey done that says participation with girls and women again. There was a brief surge with the women's Euros, as now suddenly these participation levels are dropping off again. So clearly, netball wanting to go professional, showing that there is a professional pathway, would would possibly entice more girls and women to stay playing. And so there is a career path there where you can get paid. The women's football success, not just in England but also in Spain, has shown that there is a career pathway now for professionalism in women's football. Women's rugby league in Australia, I think, is leading the way over Super League here, but rugby league is starting to show that there is a progression pathway where you can earn money. And to a certain aspect, rugby union with a handful of not much professionalism, but there is certain pathways in place. Netball wants to also get on that pathway. Now, I think netball could have the best chance of actually being the most profitable sport going for women's sport because it's women centric and the crowd numbers are really good. And there is a decent TV deal, so there is the money there for it to be professional. I have no doubt it will be. But there is a study that's has recently been done. I can't remember it was a survey, and it is starting to indicate that again, women and girls are stopping playing sport again. There's that drop off again that we've discussed previously, um, which is a concern, considering that the recent successes of the women's football team and obviously the women's rugby union and rugby league teams massively improving and regularly being pretty high up there in achievement is not translating to the wider community. Um, netball can be a pretty brutal sport, actually. They say it's not meant to be non-contact, but they do clatter into each other quite a lot. It's not a bad sport. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't find it very interesting. Not because it's sport, but it's netball. It's the women's version of basketball. I don't find basketball interesting, but these are two netball and basketball are sports that do not appeal to me. Um, just because I hated playing basketball. So, and as it's a similar sport to basketball, it doesn't appeal to me in the sense that I just don't find basketball engaging. It's too end to end. Don't get me wrong. I sometimes love end to end sport where it's both sides are going at it and it's fun, free flowing, high energy. But it's just too much scoring end to end. It's ridiculous. Scoring is too much. Um, and I could never get into it. I just never enjoyed playing it. I don't mind watching it casually, but I can't get invested and I can't go hardcore as a fan. But I've always said this: I've got on every respect for any athlete who plays any sport at any level. Um, there's just some sports that I just generally don't interest me. But that doesn't mean that those fans who do like things like baseball and basketball and netball shouldn't be valued, and that those people who play those sports shouldn't be valued as what they're doing. Um, but for me, it just doesn't. I don't get that connection with certain sports. But as I say, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be valued and they shouldn't be invested in, shouldn't be viewed, and you know people can't enjoy the sport for what it is. Um, but no, I wouldn't be surprised if Alicia Scholes and the controversy she's created is actually creating more interest for netball because it's creating netball headlines. It's creating a talking point. Um, yeah, look, as I say, to be a netball player and to be a basketball player, you've got to have a certain attributes. And basketball, I don't have those attributes. I'm it's just not a sport that suits my physiology and my skill set. And I also just never really enjoyed playing it anyway because I wasn't very good at it for one, and I just didn't really enjoy it. It, yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. But excuse me, a lot of my friends did enjoy it and still enjoy it, and so you have to give them that kind of you know credit where credit's due. Um, but for me, it was never a sport that I enjoyed. But no, with Alicia Scholes' case, because this is creating conversation and creating debate, and um, we're discussing it now, even though she hasn't posted any. I'm actually going to see if she's actually on Instagram now because it'll be interesting. So I want to see what some of this content is. And I've not, you know, don't have her on Instagram, but no, it is creating debate when netball's in the debate. Controversy creates headlines, which creates interest. People are like, well, who is this? And then you find out she's actually a pretty decent player who just happens to be a little bit, risque in her social media posts. Um, well, the Neville family and the Scholes family. I mean, look, the Neville brothers and Paul Scholes have known each other for over 30 years. And then, of course, you've got Tracy Neville, who's a netball coach. And I believe now she's an administrator now. I think she's gone from coaching to administration. Um, how do I spell it? I can't spell. How has Alicia Silverstone got 2.4 million followers? She cannot act. Um, right. Well, she's got 3 Instagrams, I've found. So I'm assuming that is ridiculous. That's one of them. That's two of them. She's got 3 Instagrams. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. She's even got a backup one. So she's got her risky one, and she's got another risky one. If the first risky one is in breach of, that's ridiculous. And she's got a fan page one as well. Um, I, it, as I say, like she's not done anything illegal or done anything wrong, depending on what your moral standpoint is. She hasn't broken any law, um, but it is controversial. And suddenly we're talking about it, going, well, let's see what this is all about. Oh, she plays for the London Pulse netball team. Let's see what they're all about. And suddenly, there you go. Within a couple of clicks, you're on the netball page of the team, on their Instagram, on their Facebook, on their Twitter, whatever it may be. Um, and look, you got to think, she's got 100,000 followers. That's 100,000 people who are now linked to netball in some way via a player. Now, out of that 100,000, you may have a couple of thousand girls and women who will get involved in netball. Suddenly, it's helped grow the sport. She's the netball player with the second highest number of Instagram followers, so she's not the only one who's posting risky content. And that would be my viewpoint. If she's the second highest followed netball player for followers, second highest, and there's another netball player who's got even bigger following, then that tells you something. That says something about um, that she's posting risky content. Imagine what that other netball player is posting. I don't know any of their names, by the way, so it shows how little interest I pay into netball. But that tells you something about what's going on. Um, so, and you would think, yeah, out of that, she's gonna have fans who will then talk about, you know, with their friends. Oh, I've got tickets to a London Pulse game. Do you want to come? There you go. Suddenly you've got a new fan in the arena. Who knew? But no, the reason why it's creating debate is who had done it. Now, let's say we're talking about Netball World Cup, and suddenly this becomes a story that becomes a distraction for the team. The only reason at the moment this is becoming a topic is who my dad is. Who? Helen Hoosby. But no, but that was the only question I ask is if she's controversial, why? Who? How? What's the other player done? Current or ex-player done? What I'm getting at is that that's outrage. A lot of those followers will be genuine fans of the sport. Now, we're only talking about it because of who her dad is. But imagine if this all breaks, like this raunchiness breaks while there are Commonwealth Games or Olympic, is it World Championships, World Cup, Commonwealth Games, and she's on international duty, and a newspaper or a website gets hold of this and goes, "Well, look what our star player's doing, or one of our star players is doing on her social media. This is risque, raunchy photos and videos." That would create a massive distraction for the team. And when you're going into pre and post match press conferences and the coach has got to answer questions about a player's off court behaviour, which is not illegal, by the way, she's done nothing wrong legally, but you've got to answer these questions, that's when it becomes a negative. As far as I know, I don't think her coaches have got a problem with her social media content. She's not posting anything illegal or controversial, technically. She's not in the buff. She's got clothing on. Whether it's morally right that she's doing is another thing. Well, look, they've obviously got the poster children, their PR faces, I call it. But no, in regards to these netball players, if this was to become a discussion point on international duty, or if it was starting to appear in press conferences going, well, these raunchy photos have appeared of one of your players. We'll use Houseby and Scholes. These two players, there's been some questions over their social media conduct, etc., etc. And of course, Helen Hoosby, as you say, is the face of the sport. I don't know anything about netball players and quality of the sport, but if she's like the David Beckham of her team, and Alicia Scholes is the Jack Grealish equivalent, because he's always in the press for doing stupid and being drunk. But you get where I'm getting at. These are high-profile players, and they're sort of like the faces of the sport that the governing body want to promote. The teams want to, use them as the face of their team. So look, put these individuals up because these will resonate. One of them's got a famous dad; he's an ex-sportsman. The other one is just generally the most recognisable player for what she's done on court and within the sport. If this was to suddenly become a press conference thing when they're preparing for a tournament or a pre-match or a post-match press conference or a pre or post-training conference, where the media are there asking, and there's more media than normal, and this is the line of question going to the head coach of said team, we'll go Tracy Neville. And they're asking questions. Okay, social media content of your players is creating a discussion point. It's been raised that this may be a negative connotation, not within bringing the sport to disrepute, this kind of thing, and it starts to create traction. That's going to be a distraction. But as far as I'm aware, there's no issue here. I think we're making more about this than we need to. To me, there's nothing to see here. This is not a problem. There are some male players in various sports whose social media is far more inappropriate than that. Like Carl Walker, quite honestly, dobbed himself in for his COVID breaches and some of his adult activities after 9 p.m. Watershed, which were far more inappropriate, some of it was actually illegal. Moses King basically dobbed himself in for his house parties during COVID. Jack Grealish, drink driving, getting caught on social media. One of his friends or someone filmed him pissed as a fart driving his car, and he crashed his car whilst drunk during COVID. So Alicia Scholes, what I can gather from her Instagram, that's hardly the raunchiest stuff I've ever seen. I mean, as I say, we can debate whether it's appropriate, but it's not the worst social media account of a professional athlete I've ever seen. I wouldn't be surprised though if we are going to be discussing social media guidelines in sport. We are definitely going to be having this debate, whether it's netball, whether it's football or rugby league or ice hockey or cricket or whatever sport we're talking about, where social media conduct comes into a sport or league's code of conduct, and what is and isn't acceptable to post on social media. Because we've had this rear its ugly head before, where a player's put a tweet up or a status on Facebook or something on Instagram, and then they've had to take it down. Like when Israel Folau was posting his inappropriate, his controversial stuff, you know what would happen? A journalist would ask about the Instagram photos, and he would be attacked for taking. He'll be attacked talking about Instagram photos, not the sport. He'll be called a sexist and a perv. I think there is a cause of concern where it's bringing the sport to disrepute. Then I think it's justifiable. If it's a female journalist who's raising the article or raising the question, that's completely different, because I don't think there's many netball journalists who are men. When it comes to the press conference, if that was a female journalist, I think we're having a different debate, which I think is completely wrong. I think it's a legitimate question to ask about the social media conduct of your players. Israel Folau was warned about his social media conduct. He continued to attack a group in society. Ultimately, it led to him being suspended by Rugby Australia. And then we had a couple of other players come out in support of Israel Folau, and they were told, this is what's acceptable, this is what's not. This sport is inclusive for everyone. We're going to get backlash. So Billy Vanapola was told, actually, Billy, mate, we've got to try and be as partial as possible. But because of your actions, we may have potentially players of the LGBTQ plus community that may be even less comfortable about coming out or less comfortable about playing or being involved in the sport. Um, and that's what that happened there, and people are still divided even now about the Israel Folau saga that happened all those years ago. But that was raised at the time. But no, I don't think necessarily the journalist would be attacked, especially if the content, social media posting, or the content and the actions of the player, in this case Alicia Scholes, but it could be any netball player, it could be any female athlete, was bringing their sport into disrepute. I think that is a fair comment to ask, and then we all have to basically ask, what is the social media code of conduct? What are athletes allowed to post, not allowed to post, whilst they're under contract with a team or centralised contract with the country? And that, I think, is a legitimate question to ask, especially if your target fan base is of a younger audience. I think that is legitimate. If you are a role model for younger people, I think that's a legitimate question. I think we should be asking about more male athletes as well, about them being role models for young teenage youth who are at risk of being very impressionable and doing things quite stupid. Um, I mean, we Israel Folau was warned about his social media conduct and continued down the path he was on. Look, yeah. I mean, New Zealand are playing Australia in a netball international. Is it? When is it? Is it this weekend? I think it is this weekend. I think, yeah, Australia are playing New Zealand this weekend in the netball international, and then Australia play a three-test series against Africa. Don't ask me how I know that, but I do because I watched the rugby league and it's on Fox Sports in Australia, and of course they advertise the other. It's getting a lot of it's getting a lot of promotion. Um, but no, Israel Folau. I mean, he was warned about his social media conduct in 2018. He doubled down in 2019. Um, he was warned, he was given a final warning, and then he did the same thing again. He was warned about what he was posting on social media. Now, if the netballing authorities go to Alicia Scholes or Helen Housby and go, okay, this is what is acceptable, this is what not acceptable, this is what we're saying from now on, you must stick to these guidelines, and then let's say Alicia Scholes doesn't, then I think it is right that the journalist, in theory, should be allowed to ask the question going, well, this has happened again. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to fine the player, suspend the player, reprimand the player in some way? It shouldn't matter that the gender of the journalist asking the question. As long as it's legitimate and it is a fair question, I think it should be allowed. I think social media go, oh, this journalist is not. No, this journalist is doing his job. This journalist is asking the right question. Um, but no, Israel Folau, he was warned about his social media conduct. He could have those views in private, potentially, but not public. And then it became a religious thing, civil rights. It sort of snowballed out of control. But basically, he was a bit of a div. He did himself no favours, and it ended up costing him his career, really, because he basically got sacked from rugby union, and then no one in rugby league wanted to touch him until Catalan were like, well, we'll give him a go as long as he behaves. He didn't actually behave the entire time with his behaviour. Some controversy there, and his career never recovered. It cost him a lot of money. Um, it created a lot of controversy, and it damaged the reputation of himself. Rugby union in Australia has taken a massive hit, cost them a lot of money. Look how they're struggling right now. And ultimately, his career never recovered. He never played another rugby union match again. He played a bit of league, but that was it. So, honestly, be very careful what you do. It can have massive consequences. Now, obviously, he's a very wealthy man. He doesn't have to work again if he invests his money correctly. But I think we've seen high-profile athletes really put their foot in it on social media. I think what if we can get away from the point we're on to another point, is what I think we're going to have to see in a variety of sports is a very open, transparent, publicly available social media code of conduct for whatever sport it may be. Well, yeah, but yeah, you could say that, but could that be classed as bringing the sport into disrepute, or is that empowering for women, or both? Could be both. Um, it only becomes a problem if it becomes a distraction for the team in regards to journalists before, during, and after games, putting the microphone in the face, going, you know, is this appropriate? Is this the image netball wants to be giving out to potential new fans, sponsors, and but it's creating discussion, which means we're talking about netball, which means we're very likely to, with our female friends and relatives, have this conversation. Go, "Oh, what's your views on this?" Okay, and they may not know who she is. And I go, "What's your view on this?" And they go, "What do you mean? Look at that." And then they go, "Oh, but by the way, she's a professional netball player. She's an athlete. What's your view now?" And it changes it. If I was to say, if I was to, say to my mum, "Well, there you go. Look at this," and she would probably be disgusted. I don't like that. Oh, but if she's a professional netball player, by the way, she's a high pro. Actually, her dad's Paul Scholes. She go, well, her dad's Paul Scholes. Oh, so it's a famous person's daughter being egotistical. Oh, but she's also a professional athlete herself. She plays netball. That then changes the conversation we are having if you bring netball into it. If you didn't know she was a netball player, then you'd like, well, it's just, a bimbo, stereotypical bimbo. But when you say, oh, but by the way, she's a professional athlete and her dad was a high profile professional athlete, changes the conversation. But does it change your perception of what it is? So I wouldn't be surprised if yeah, as netball potentially wants to get professional, that they bring in a social media code of conduct, social media usage, and what is and isn't acceptable. We've seen other sports at various points tell their players or the athletes, this is what is and isn't acceptable. I think if she stopped doing it, it's fine, but you can put it down to immaturity. If she keeps doing it, it becomes. I wouldn't say. I don't think so. I think it only becomes a problem when it negatively impacts her team and her teammates. Um, as I said, there's nothing at the moment that would be of concern. It's not as if she's posing alongside like a spliff and a bag of suspicious white powder called cocaine. It's not as if she's showing silly photos like what Valentine Holmes did at the end of last NRL season, or getting caught on camera like Cameron Munster and Brandon Smith on the piss on the drugs. If that ended up on social media, then we're having a debate about, hang on a second, what's actually going on here? How now she's bringing the sport to disrepute. She's not made a political statement or an inappropriate statement on her social media profiles, be it on Twitter or on Facebook, where she's put a status up that you know is inappropriate. She's not fully in the buff. And as I say, I follow a couple of rugby league players who, as I say, some of their content is like, this is their training regime, this is that training camp, and then they're like, oh, here's me in not a lot of clothes on the beach, or in not wearing a lot, and you're like, you're trying to grow your sport and be a positive role model. That could be female empowerment, or it could be construed as that's a bit sleazy. Um, but I wouldn't. I, I'm on the fence on this one. The only time I think it starts to become an issue is if it's negatively impacting her teammates because there's a lot of questions being asked about, or it gets to a point where her off-court antics, so her social media content in her private life starts to impact her performances on the court, her relationship with coaches and teammates, and therefore it impacts the team's performance. And you know, or it's something really controversial, like it could be a controversial photo shoot or something like that, and it's or maybe yeah, she posts the wrong thing by accident that's in breach of social media standards by the social media companies, and then it's like, hang on a second, what's going on here? But I think 10, 15 years ago, we're not having this conversation because social media wasn't where it is now. We're not having this conversation about athletes posting content on social media being political or inappropriate content or suggestive photos or anything. We're not having this conversation 10, 15 years ago. We're not. The landscape has changed, and younger younger sports fans engage with their sports stars on social media. Like this is Whereas older sports fans, when they were the same age, would have probably sent fan mail into the team. Like, I'm going to send, I want to, I'll send some fan mail into the football club, rugby club, whatever team hit. Now, that fan mail is by responding, like leaving a comment under a photo or a social media post. That's that's their, or sending them a personal message. That's now the version of fan mail. So younger fans are now engaging via social media rather than by the traditional pen and paper, sending a letter to the club saying, is it possible to get a signed shirt from player or whatever. Well, again, that's the society we're now living in, where personal ego and you know the narcissistic personal ego. We're living in a society of narcissists, egotistical narcissists, egomaniacs. The men, so, as I said, social media is having more of a negative than a positive when it comes to mental health. Now, all fair play to her for being body positive and confident in her body and confident in herself and feeling like that. Fair play. But there, it is a very fine line, and we are seeing a rise in young people, especially, struggling with depression and mental health issues, far higher than what it was pre social media. We're talking massive increase in reported cases of self harm, depression, admissions to hospital, um, dependency issues with drugs and alcohol. It's far higher than what it was when we were in our early 20s and late teens. 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's completely, the landscape has completely changed. Um, but in regards to her, I mean, as long as it's not impacting her playing ability and impacting her team and causing, fans to boycott games going, we're not happy. If fans start going, actually, we're not happy. Fans give feedback going, hang on a second, this is not what we want to see. Um, or if parents of kids go, I don't want my kids to see this. This is not. That's when it starts impacting the sport itself. But to be honest, as I said, the only reason why we're talking about it in any way, shape, or form is because of her dad being Paul Scholes. Any other netball player who doesn't have a famous dad, we're not having this conversation at all until the mainstream media goes, well, look what our netball players are doing. Is this the face of netball? It's when a newspaper like the Daily Mail runs an article about it, or the Times or the Telegraph, one of those centre right to right wing rags starts trying to take the moral high ground, which I find hilarious because they don't have or Daily Express or whatever it is, tries to take the moral high ground and going, writing an article. Or as well, whether one of the sleazy tabloids like the Sun or the Star write an article about it, or the Mirror. Until that happens, it's a non-event. It's a non-event. I think it's been overblown. and I'm sat on the fence. Um, well, have you seen her dad? Paul Scholes ain't a looker either, really. Um, I think she's genuinely confident. Well, again, that you know, that's a debate. We don't know her mental health status. I mean, we don't know if that is a little personal pick me up boost. Is like, okay, I'll wear a bit of makeup. Like, we're not women. We cannot comment on how a woman feels and the issues they face. We cannot comment on that. That's how I see it. I can comment on how a fellow bloke feels because I know what it's like to, you know, be in that same position. But a woman, I can't comment on um, a woman's mental health struggles or a woman's body confidence struggles or things like that. I can't comment on something that I can't experience myself. Um, but I do know a lot of uh, female rugby league players paint their nails still and have their ponytails and sometimes have a lot of makeup. There's one, Taylor Preston, who always goes in for a fake tanning session before she plays. 3 hours before she's due at a game, she will have a fake tan done. I'm not joking, it's part of her pre-match routine. She's a damn good player as well, and she's not unattractive, I can tell you that. But that's part of her pre-match routine. That's her little. A lot of athletes are always very superstitious. Um, and if that's part of their superstition and they keep winning or they keep performing well, they're going to keep doing their superstition. So when I was playing football in goal, I'd always put my left glove on first and then my right, and I would do them up twice. So I'd undo them and do them up again. I always put my left boot on before my right. Um, I, it's weird. You talk to anyone who plays sport, they are very superstitious. If you're playing well, you keep up with the superstition. If you're playing badly, you change something until you start playing well. So yeah, there's a rugby league player in the NRLW who has a Taylor Preston. She has a fake tan 3 hours before a game. It's a part of her pre-match routine. However weird that may sound and silly that may sound, or vanity, to her, that's part of her pre-match routine. Um, and she's been consistently one of the best players in the women's game for 3, 4 years now. So I can see that being part of a positive pre-match routine. Um, you'll see certain goal kickers have a certain goal kicking routine. They will go through like Dan Bigger, for example, the Dan Bigger shuffle, where he has a weird, build up to his goal kick in rugby union. It works for him. He's got a very good kicking percentage. Owen Farrell, he'll look up and he'll look up again. And he'll look at his kick percentage. Um, so yeah, sportsmen and women are very superstitious. Very superstitious. Um, but it would be interesting to see what a female perspective on the situation would be. Um, but I can't comment on that. But having the Daily Star running a smutty story on her surely isn't going to make her and her dad feel happy. Look, here's the thing. 75% on average of what you see in the mainstream media, especially in newspapers, is bollocks. I did media studies, I can tell you that for a fact. We were told that 70 to 75% of what is published is bollocks. And the amount of times, especially in the sports side of things, with high profile football players who may have a high profile wife or girlfriend, like Wayne Rooney and David Beckham, they'll be phoning up their lawyers going, "We've got a libel case here." If you watch the Paul Gascoigne documentary, um, the phone hacking and all that, it was, yeah. Uh, you hear of some. It's the same in the US and Canada. It's the same in Australia. It's the same in New Zealand. Depending on the amount of crap that's printed that's not true, and look at the amount of times people pay damages for libel and slander. Libel's the in print, slanders by verbal. And in the end, it becomes a bit of a running gag. Oh, that's all BS they're printing today about us. Honestly, um, like the Wagatha Christie, remember that? Jamie Vardy, Wayne Rooney's upper arms in court. That became almost embarrassing, really. But oh, what Matt Letizier's relative, daughter-in-law. Matt Letizia is a bit controversial these days with some of the stuff he says and puts on social media. Is the old Tiz, great player but controversial off the field. With some of his views on politics and pharmaceuticals and vaccines. So, similar to Glenn Hoddle, really, actually, with some of his controversy. But no, again, nothing illegal. As long as she's within jurisdiction and what is allowed within jurisdictions, nothing illegal. Whether we can agree of morally or immoral is another thing. But as I say, I think a lot of these newspapers and media websites, they want people to buy the newspaper or click on the article so they get the ad revenue. They want to sensationalise stuff. And Paul Scholes and his daughter, he's probably very supportive of his daughter's netball career. Oh, fantastic. We know he's playing really well. And as long as she's happy, I think he's happy. I think they'll be probably having a giggle about, what's going on. I watched the Under the Kosh podcast on YouTube with Matt Letizier's episode. And they sort of skirt around that. They don't really push him on that. He basically says, well, I've got my views and that's what cost me my job. They don't really push him on it. They don't ask the question. They basically acknowledge that he lost his job because that he's a bit outspoken. And that's about it, really. But Matt Letizier is a bit controversial these days. As a player, brilliant player. See him play, fantastic player. Underrated player, I believe. But in the last, I'm going to say, even just before COVID, in the last 4 or 5 years, he's suddenly become very controversial, especially more so in the last 2 to 3 years. And as Sky Sports and as Sky B was being bought out by Comcast, and Comcast stated, we will be making structural changes post 2021 when all our sporting TV deals end and some of our contracts with TV programs end. Matt Letizier, unfortunately, as a byproduct of being controversial, it was easy for them to go, we're not going to renew your contract. If he was less controversial, he stays on Soccer Saturday. He stays on the prime time football coverage on Sky Sports as a pundit. Because he became controversial, it made the decision by Comcast management to not offer him a contract extension or offer him a new contract. It just made things easy where they can go, well, we're not sacking you as such, but we're not renewing your contract with us. You come to the end of your contractual arrangement with us, we're not going to give you a new one. That's as simple as that. He had a brief advertising stint with Paddy Power, where he did some funny tongue-in-cheek adverts taking the piss out of Sky Sports, which I found funny. Not that I'm a massive fan of sports gambling, right? But Matt Letizier being controversial made it easy for Comcast, who own B Sky B, who own Sky Sports, not to renew his contract. And then they were restructuring their presenting team anyway, and that was the fallout. It's like Ron Atkinson making his racist comments against Marcel Desailly back in, I think, 2004, 2005. He's not worked in the media since. He, he, he ended his media, he cancelled himself before cancel culture was a thing. Um, some some ex-players or media commentators are controversial, and sometimes that gets them a lot of jobs, like Piers Morgan, and sometimes, like Frank Buff or Ron Atkinson, it basically is a career ender. I don't think Matt Letizia is going to be out of work completely. I think at some point, a broadcaster um, will go to Letizia, we want you for whatever TV or podcast or YouTube channel, something to do with we want you as an occasional guest. We'll give you some work. You will get some work. Well, Lineker play, the Lineker situation is interesting. There is no doubt that he's a very intelligent man. I don't think he's thick. I really don't. I think Gary Lineker is more intelligent than a lot of people give him credit for. I wouldn't necessarily say Gary Lineker is a champagne socialist, but he's sort of leaning towards that a little bit, doing the same as I do. However, um, I don't have a problem with Gary Lineker as such. There are some people who find him a bit controversial, especially with his, anti-government tweets. He's made it very clear that he's not in favour of government policy in regards to a lot of issues, which is his right. He's also a citizen of this country. He pays tax in this country. He votes in this country. I think. So there you go. Piers Morgan sacks himself by being an absolute bellend. He still is an absolute bellend. He's just making money by being a bellend because he's controversial. He comes across as quite a nasty individual. Now, occasionally, yes, especially when it comes to some of his views, unfortunately, I agree with him because they're called common sense. But no, he does come across as he's made a career out of basically being a nasty piece of shit and not being particularly nice and smearing people, printing lies, hacking dead schoolgirls' mobile phones. Yeah, he did that. He denies he did that, but he was the chief editor of the Mirror at the time that they did that, so he would have had to tick off, do that, please. So Piers Morgan's made a career for the best part of 30 years by being a sleazy bastard and being a nasty bastard and not a particularly nice person and a gutter journalist, basically. The worst kind of tabloid gutter journalism. He's done it for 30 years and he continues to do it. And he's now doubled down from just being a bit of a cheap journalist in the tabloid newspapers to being deliberately controversial and deliberately confrontational when he doesn't need to be. And then he had his Piers Morgan program on ITV where he talks to the very same people he was writing nasty shit about. His Ronaldo one where he's basically sucking Ronaldo's cock for an hour and a half, which is the most cringeworthy interview I've ever seen. No, he doesn't do some good interviews. He does nasty stuff. Oh, and he's an Arsenal fan, so it gives me a second reason to dislike him. Not I'm saying Arsenal are a bad team, but I'm not a massive fan of Arsenal. But Piers Morgan, to me, I think people like to be offended. He's controversial, so people are like, "What's this twat doing now?" They're just going to watch to see. Let's see what's he going to do. I know people who can't stand him who actually watch all his interviews. I'm like, why are you watching? If you hate it that much, dislike this person that much, why are you? It's like Jeremy Kyle on Talk TV. It was like, how the hell that guy got back into the media after his scandal on ITV. This is why I don't think Matt Letizia is going to be out of work for long. I really don't. Glenn Hoddle still gets work, and I do mean this. Glenn Hoddle still gets media work. Doesn't get coaching work anymore, but he gets media work. And he's got his views on the disabled and spirituality and faith healing, and he's a bit of a wacko himself. Yet he still gets work, and here's a reason why he was sacked as England manager in 1999. It's because of his views on disabled people, and he did an Israel Folau basically. And honestly, and before social media was a thing, Glenn Hoddle basically cancelled himself. Yet he still gets media commitments now and still gets paid for them. He's not as impactful as he used to be, not as much as he used to be. He's still getting a lot of media gigs now where he's doing punditry and commentary for a variety of channels during World Cups and Euros and stuff and FA Cups. He's getting his high profile gigs not as regularly, but he is. So Matt Letizia, I have no doubt, will if Southampton do well in the FA Cup this year, done a bit of a run. I bet you they get Matt Letizia down um, as a pitch side analyst or a pundit for a Southampton FA Cup game. I have no doubt on that. Or he's one of the guests where he's being interviewed. I have no doubt that he will get some media commitments. I don't think Matt Letizia is done. I think at the moment, yeah, he's a little bit controversial. That will pass. If Piers Morgan and Jeremy Kyle can still get work in the media, and they are far worse than Matt Letizia will get work again. Glenn Hoddle can still get work, and he's controversial with some of his personal beliefs and views. Matt Letizia is fine. He's the least controversial of the lot. Look, Piers Morgan, who is a pompous prat, is anything to go by. Matt Letizia, I think, will get work again. But no, honestly, I think the sports media, though, I think the quality of it, I think the quality of sports media reporting, I think the quality of commentary, punditry, production values is a lot less now than what it was 10, 15 years ago. Again, we've dumbed it down. We've gone with diversity hires that aren't up to the job. They're hired because of their colour of their skin, their religious background, their gender, rather than the best available person for the job. It all started with Jake Humphrey. Honestly, Jake Humphrey was just hired because they needed to get a bit younger on the BBC, and then it worked. They realised very, very quickly Jake Humphrey's not very good, and so BT picked him up, and then BT no longer exists. So let that sink in. So if Jake Humphrey can continue to get work by being an absolute dreadful presenter and a dreadful journalist, if Dan Rowan can keep his job at the BBC after all his controversy, I think Matt Letizia is fine somehow. I think he'll get work. He'll probably get some public speaking gigs, no doubt, and still have a career at some point. Anyway, I'm going to call that a stream. I've been going for over 3 hours now. Thank you very much for all your questions. I think I've had a bit more of a rant in this live stream. I think it's common sense. I think the way certain things are covered, I don't think it's balanced. I think the NCAA university program in the US got to be questions asked about their integrity after a whole range of scandals, not just I think it was the Pittsburgh or Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or what? What's the state? Philadelphia the state? Pennsylvania is the state. I think no, Penn State. I think it was Pennsylvania, the state university. I think it was either Pittsburgh or Penn State or one of them. Or no, Wisconsin. That's it. University of Wisconsin swimming team. It wasn't Philadelphia. Why do I have that stuck in my head? It was Wisconsin State. Their swimming program. Oh God, remember it now. But the student athletes in the NCAA program, it's not just the women's swim team on the women's student swim team at Wisconsin. There are issues there. It's across the board. There's been issues over, are they exploiting their athletes? Are they looking after athlete welfare? Are they properly reimbursing them? Doping scandals, all sorts. So there is that. But no, it's definitely, I think there's not enough balanced sports reporting. I think there is an agenda to twist things. And of course, we've discussed a lot about athletes' social media content again. And in this case, it's Alicia Scholes, but before it was Israel Folau, and obviously Gary Lineker as an ex-athlete, now as a sports presenter. Um, and whether it's appropriate, brings their sport to disrepute, whether they've had warnings, like Israel Folau and Billy Vanapola were, they were warned. Billy Vanapola very, very quickly took his warning on the chin and went, okay, I accept that. No, well dealt with. Israel Folau doubled down on his stupidity by doing it again and basically got sacked for ripping up the contract he brought the sport to disrepute. Whether Rugby Australia was right to do that's another thing. And of course, with Alicia Scholes and with her social media content, it's a bit raunchy, but it's not overly attacking a group in society. It's not overly being political. No, Matt Letizia, okay, he said some controversial things that weren't sport related, and it was an excuse for Comcast, who owns Sky, to go, we're not going to renew your contract. So we've ended on that point, but we've discussed a lot of stuff. I think at one point we were discussing doping and the possibility it happens in women's rugby league and women's rugby union. Is that the next category of sport to be at risk of anabolic steroid and performance enhancing drug misuse? Potentially, yes. And then we obviously went from that to ended up where we are now 2 hours later. It's amazing how we can get on a tangent, isn't it? But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions. Really appreciate it. I will have some more content for you soon, but I need to get a cup of tea. Not going to lie, I need a cup of tea. Or maybe a glass of warm milk. Because, yeah, that's the thing. But for me, for now, it is goodbye. Thank you for all the questions. We've discussed a lot of stuff. And I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.